Hello? Blue is open. See, mine's working. This is,
Do where we are on the agenda?
This is black is muted. Of course, on my watch, right?
So you're welcome to, if you want to make a public comment. I didn't have you part of the presentation. I didn't want to make this a board beat up brain shit. So, but you're welcome to put in a card.
It was working earlier.
Make a statement.
Mine's is Alana's.
Yeah, if I said yeah, 7-ish will be close. Stay what you can. Just stay what you can. Yeah, good. We'll earn some of the pay.
Black is mute. So mine's the only one working.
Hello.
Testing. Oh, mine's working.
It's, am I work? Oh.
Yep.
Okay, Rick.
Yay.
Rick, you are hired. You have 17 jobs now. Okay, welcome. We'll call the meeting to order properly, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thank you. We have no actions from closed session to report, nothing considered in closed session for action in open session. Do we have any statements of abstention tonight? Seeing none, we move on to C5, adjustments to the agenda. Does anyone have any specific adjustments to the agenda?
I have some adjustments to the agenda. I'd like to pull item E5. Also, item F10.
Okay. Any others? Then I... Okay. Well, then I am going to make an adjustment to the agenda, and that is that I am going to move F1 to commence right now. We'll call F1 now because I think we have some special students here for a special performance.
Yes, President, close in honor of Arts Education Month, we are presenting this resolution. And would you like to speak a bit to this, Coordinator Evans?
Yes,
Great.
I would. Now
Okay.
that the microphone works, I would like to introduce the students that we have here this evening from Luther Burbank Elementary School and Santa Rosa Charter School for the Arts, and they are going to play in honor of this request that we make March Arts Education Month. And I'm going to tell you the names of the students. They are handy-dandily on my phone. And we have on violin, we have Violet, Sage, Julia, Alejandro, and Brian. On viola, we have Gabriel. And on cello, we have Iggy, Johnny, and Maggie. And we have their teachers, Rachel Daniel, and also Nicholas Hodson. And we really appreciate you all taking the time, and also your parents. Thank you so much for coming today. Here they go. Thank you.
Encore.
If you insist.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for playing. I'm sure Coldplay would be really proud to have been featured here at the Santa Rosa School Board meeting.
You guys did an awesome job. Thank you.
Good. Those are some hard instruments to decide to learn to play. Right?
Thank you also to the parents and teachers for being here.
Thank you very much. You can, well, you know, from our arts charter to the support for our music program that this district really cares about the arts and supports the arts in every way we can. And so I think it's great that we're bringing forward this resolution. And it is an action item since it's a resolution. So if anyone has a motion, I will entertain that. Director Medina.
I'd like to move that we adopt a resolution declaring March as Arts Education Month in Santa Rosa City Schools.
I second.
Okay, moved by Director Medina and second by Director Manieri. Discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please, Renee.
Director Medina,
Aye.
Director Manieri,
Aye.
Director Fong,
Aye.
Director McCormick,
Aye.
Director Sheffield,
Aye.
President Close,
Aye.
Director Mackin,
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to C6, board member requests for information. Do we have any requests for information tonight? C7, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting held on March 13th, 2019. Director Medina.
Yeah, I'd like to move to amend item C7 on the minutes. It indicates that I voted yes and I abstained on that item.
Okay, so would you like to move, and I think that what we need is a motion to move approval of this item with the amendment offered by Director Medina. Do we have such a motion?
So moved.
Well, I think the reason you abstained is because you were not at the meeting. And
Correct.
So
during the meeting, I abstained, and here the minutes reflect that I voted yes.
right, okay. So, but okay, yes. Go ahead. So I'm just getting straight what we're doing. So you're going to move the
So I move to approve the minutes with the amendment to item C7, indicating that I abstained.
Okay. Thank you. we have a second?
Second.
All right. Moved by Director Medina and seconded by Director McCormick. Roll call vote, please.
Director Medina,
Aye.
Director McCormick,
Aye.
Director Manieri,
Aye.
Director Fong,
You need to abstain.
Abstain.
Director Sheffield,
Aye.
President Close,
Aye.
Director Mackin,
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries. Now brings us to C8, public comment on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board on issues that are not on the agenda. I don't have any blue cards, and so we'll do one last call for any public comment not on the agenda, and with that, we will move on to reports, which brings us to D1. CSEA report is President Afonso. Yes, there she is. President Afonso, welcome.
Hello? Okay. Good evening, President Close. She just says speak up.
You just need to be closer to it.
Good evening, President Close, Superintendent Kitamura, school board members, student school board member. CSEA was happy to announce last evening that our chapter approved four of our updated job descriptions, and we look forward to having more of those done. In the meantime, we look forward to coming back together to finish our negotiations also. Thank you.
Thank you, President Afonso. Brings us to SRTA report. President Lyon, I see you up there.
Hi, everybody. I just got back from out of town. I'll spare you the details. I know the news of the day for us is that we have a tentative agreement, and I'm just learning about those details, and we haven't shared it all with our members yet. But it's overall, I think, a positive, of course, a positive outcome that we have an agreement. I think that'll change the conversation going forward, and I look forward to learning more about the agreement and how our members feel about it tomorrow, and hopefully it clears a path for us to work on other things that are important. So thank you.
Thank you. Labor Management Collaborative report.
Good evening. We would like to share what we did the week before spring break. We first went to LMI, and four of the members who went were myself, Linda Zabala, Sandy Garcia, and Jason Andrews. It was a very good experience for us. We met other districts who are similar to us, have some of the same issues that we do, and so we were able to collaborate with them. ABC Unified actually offered to have us come down and see their program in process, and we would like to maybe entertain that. All of the groups that were there have the admin, teachers, classified, and school board involved in their programs. We discussed having conversations prior to agendas coming out to the public with the superintendent and the leaders of the unions and how that is working for them. Our takeaway from the conference was the dedication to improve communication, relationships, and working together, and to improve the lives of the students and all the stakeholders, to have a place you want to come to, not that you want to leave. In the 14th and 15th, we then went to Calturn. There was the four of us again along with Cindy Brennan from HR. It was a great experience. We learned and discussed the outward mindset. Very interesting program. It's by the Arbinger Institute. The note-taking was a little shorter on this one because we were involved in doing the work in our workbooks. It's a self-awareness program. Not only is it helpful in the workplace, it's also helpful in relationships at home and with your friends. This program is about making everyone, it's not about making everyone nicer. What it is about is improving the interactions within the organizations or the relationships that you have. It's a tool to use to solve conflicts at a lower level. Some of the districts spoke how they use the tool in order to find successful candidates that would be a good fit for their organization. The presenters also from Caltern would be happy to come and help us along our journey. What we came away with and we talked about on our drive home was, were we in the box? Were the arrows pointing out of the box or in the box? Is it our results or is it my results? What was the goal? It would be nice to have additional staff trained in this tool. So it'll be something that we hope when we all come back to our next LMC meeting that we will be discussing further. Thank you. Good. Thank you.
Hello. I'm back. Thank you, President Alfonso. I appreciate your work with the LMC. That was user error. It's good progress. Thank you. Okay. Superintendent report.
Thank you. Good evening, President Close, members of the board, and our community out there right now. I'm going to keep my remarks really short because we're a little worn out. It's been a long day, but a great day. As President Lyon mentioned, we have reached a tentative agreement, and the SRTA members will be taking a deeper dive into it tomorrow. But it was a great day of negotiations in this way. As I was sharing with the board, it really was a negotiation process where the dialogue went back and forth and was really professional, and the ability for us to come up with an actual agreement, I think, demonstrates that. So really just what I want to do is thank the negotiations team for their dedicated and hard work in this process. So lead negotiator Catherine Howell for SRTA, also George Peterson, Danita Haynes, Dan Swedenborg, Ginger Maddich, Maddie Doyle, and Mark Mitchell, CTA representative. For Santa Rosa City Schools, I'd like to thank lead negotiator Stacy Spector, Vicky Zanz, Gabe Albavera, Elisa Haley, Ana Guzman, Steve Mazzara, Rick Edson, and Nanamita Brown, our attorney. So I thank both teams, and Renee, oh yes, Renee Jackson. Renee, just let me tell you about Renee Jackson. I'd scoop her up in a minute to be my personal assistant anytime. She was fantastic in all the work that she did. So I thank both teams very, very much for us reaching an agreement, and I look forward to the other things that we said we're gonna do in there in terms of some committees and meetings, and look forward to the 2-year contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. I also just want to celebrate this tentative agreement and thank the negotiating teams and Superintendent for your leadership in this process, and President Lyon as well, and everyone for working hard to come to an agreement so that we can get back to the business of running the educational institution. it's been a tough go, but really exciting to have potential 2-year deal and get to take a break on this and work on some other things. So thanks to everybody involved, I think, and I really want to thank Rick and Diane, and I suspect Joel for being busy with the numbers into the wee hours on lots of nights. So thank you, everybody, for your hard work on that. I've had the pleasure of going to 2 classrooms in the last couple weeks, which is always fun. I went to Jim LaFrance's class at Montgomery High School and talked to the students there about going to school and career and issues that arise in those processes, and that was fun, and answered some questions of theirs. And then this morning, talked to Ruth and Casey Moore's classes at Santa Rosa Middle School as part of a Voices of Hope project where they interviewed me, and I was in the hot seat for about an hour, and they took video of it. And luckily, they're at the end of their video making process, so I think most of me will end up on the cutting room floor, which I'm much more comfortable with, but it's always really fun to get out in the classrooms and talk to students. So I appreciate the invitations from those teachers, and I'm always happy to do it. So it's a board member report night, since we don't have awards, so let's start with Director Medina.
I just really want to say that I'm very glad that we've reached a tentative agreement with SRTA, but aside from that, I've got nothing to report at the moment.
Director Sheffield?
Say hooray for our tentative agreement. I also report that on March 4th, I attended one of the Cesar Chavez Language Academy's parent coffee meetings. As many of us know, that they have a very engaged school community at CCLA, and I appreciated the invitation to participate in this meeting. At the meeting, Principal Rocha updated parents and family members on the transition to the Cook campus, and parents let me know about some of their concerns, which I did share with Diane and staff. And also, I will say, in honor of Arts Education Month, and also because I was invited, I took my 7-year-old to see the musical Pippin at Maria Carrillo's Performing and Fine Arts students production. This was a special evening because it was the last night of the production, and they honored seniors, and the singing, the choreography, the orchestra, the set lighting, costumes, they were all great. The battle scene, my son and I, we talked about that on into the evening. He got to stay up late. He was very excited. And just want to say congratulations to Denise, Elia, Yen, and her talented students on the winding down of the performance season. And that's what I have to report.
Thank you. Director McCormick?
Since my last board report, I have had the privilege to go visit several sites. I've been to Ridgeway High School, CCLA, Steel Lane Elementary, and Brook Hill Elementary. Principals Rocha, Jordan, Noble, and Perez Cook were gracious hosts and gave me really nice tours of the campus, and I got to meet a lot of teachers, and the students were very engaged. I was also very impressed, just, you know, walking around campus with the principal is always a cool experience, and on every campus, there was at least, you know, 3 or 4 students, if not more, that would come up, run, and like hug the principal at recess or in the hallway, or a high five or something like that. And I don't have vivid memories of really knowing my administrators when I was a student, and I was just so impressed with how connected the administration was with the students, and everybody seemed to know each other's names, and there was just an atmosphere of caring and knowing, so I really like that. And the highlight was returning back to Brook Hill, which is my elementary school. I went K through 6 there, and I literally grew up in the house next door to that school. So I hadn't been over there for a really long time, and so it was a cool homecoming and trip down memory lane for me. And a lot of things, like in the buildings, were just exactly how I remembered it, but they seemed much bigger in my memories. Mr. Follett was my 6th grade teacher at Brook Hill Elementary, and he's the reason I became a teacher. And I was excited to see that they have a library now named after him. So that was super cool for me to see. And then literally the first classroom that Principal Perez Cook took me into was a 5th grade classroom, and the teacher, who was just a shining bright star in the front of the class, was deep into a history lesson and stopped everything and said, "Mrs. McCormack," and came running over because she was one of my former students, English student in yearbook when I taught at Pioneer High School. And there she was, teaching her 5th grade class. So Jennifer Bloom, Mrs. Bloom. So it was fantastic. That was a really cool full circle experience for me to see her now teaching and doing a great job at it and loving her job. So it was a really special moment for me. And she also swam for me for 4 years at Pioneer, so that was pretty cool too. So I can't wait to go back and see more of what she's doing and what they're doing at Brook Hill. I also attended, this is a while back, but I attended the Pioneer High Boosters Crab Feed, and they raised thousands of dollars that night, and it was a really fun event, well attended. The place, Friedman Center, was absolutely packed, so that was pretty cool. And then next month, I have been invited to present, and I'm excited to attend the Pioneer High Athletic Hall of Fame dinner on April 6th, where I have the privilege of inducting 2 of my former athletes from Pioneer that I coached when I was there, a swimmer named Ryan Latham and a diver named Jamie Westaby. So I'm really excited about that. That'll be a new experience for me, and excited to see some people that I used to work with.
That is great. When you were at Brook Hill, did you look at all the old class pictures and find yourself?
I didn't look that closely, but I saw that they were there. I mean, that office looks almost exactly the same.
It does.
I was like, wow.
I spent some time in that office.
I know.
And I have found my pictures. Director Fong.
I got to see math in French today, 5th graders explaining math problems to each other and to their class in French, and that was exciting. I understood about every 10th word, because it's kind of like Spanish, so that's good. I've been spending my time doing study, actually. I've been studying, so we're talking about equity. So the board sets policy, and we need to be informed as policymakers, and so our district is about equity. And what does equity mean? So I've been studying culturally responsive schools and how that goes. So I'll have to put that out there some. It's interesting and it's kind of concrete, which is helpful to me. I'm also looking at initiatives to fund schools. So I really commend the negotiating team for doing such great work with integrity and coming to a tentative agreement. We're all very happy about that. I'm personally happy about that too. But also the funding, as we all know, needs to come from someplace else. You know, we just can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, or any other words, phrases like that. And so I'm looking at studying what's going on at the state, what's happening in legislation, and try to do some stuff in that arena. I also want to give a shout out to Burbank science teachers for doing an amazing job at their science contests. I think they do every year, and they take home awards, many first place awards. That's it.
Thank you. I did forget one thing that I just want to add, and I don't know if anyone's paying attention, but I go to the LC Crab Feed every year that funds their Project Grad, and it's, you know, unlike the ones at the Friedman Center that have been well established for many, many years. This is an up and comer, and it is definitely up and coming. And I want to congratulate them for having definitely the biggest crab feed they've had yet, and sort of it looks like it's turned a corner, and I think it's going to get bigger and bigger. So I was very happy to see, and it's really the same group of parents who are just really working hard on that every year. So thank you to those parents and the folks who put that on. Director Manieri.
Yeah, so I do have a few things to share. So I think last week I went to go visit Luther Burbank Elementary as well. I feel like we're talking a lot about Burbank, but they totally deserve it. So I went to go visit them, and it was very interesting having a conversation with the interim principal right now, and kind of her hopes for their Principal Cordova now coming on board, and the teachers there are just so passionate about their students and about their work, and I'm really excited to see what happens on that campus moving forward. And that makes now I only have like 5 school sites that I need to visit. So I'm almost there. I've almost met my goal. Earlier in the month, I also went to a DLAC meeting, which was awesome. I wasn't there on like board business, but it was really, really cool to see how engaged the parents are. They received a presentation from an organization called Latino Service Providers. They have youth that give talks and presentations on mental health, and they received that presentation really, really well, and were really engaged. So I'm excited also for the work that's being done there. I attended last weekend. The day is just kind of like, I don't know what day it is. I went to the SSU Education Family Summit. That was a really neat experience. There was a lot of focus on financial literacy for Latino and Spanish-speaking parents, how to navigate the college world with their students. So I really appreciated that and got a lot of really great resources from that. And then I also went to a strategic discussion on mental health for boys and men of color, and it was hosted at the California Endowment in Sacramento and organized by Mental Health California. And they were doing a lot of, they focused a lot on innovations in mental health programming and in technology and in interventions, and I definitely see a lot of really great work that could be replicated in other areas with very little resources, which is really cool. So I'd love to have a conversation about what that might look like in our district at some point. And then lastly, I went to Jan Farron. A lot of us knew Jan. I went to his memorial over the weekend, which was a really healing experience. And so that's it. That's my report.
Thank you. Director Mackin.
Yes, so we have actually started to get the ball rolling for next year, and we have some meetings coming up at Ridgeway to start talking to some students and hopefully pique their interest.
Great, thank you. Okay, I don't think we have a CSBA, NSBA report tonight. Which brings us to the consent agenda. I need, why don't we get a motion on the items that we're not pulling first? So I need a motion for E2 through E4 and E6 through E8.
I move that we pass items E1 through E4 and 6 through E8.
Second.
Moved by Director Fong and seconded by Director Medina. Roll call vote, please.
Director Fong?
Aye.
Director Medina?
Aye.
Director Manieri? Director McCormick?
Aye.
Director Sheffield?
Aye.
President Close?
Aye.
Director Mackin?
Hi.
Okay, motion carries in E5. Superintendent.
Yes, President Close, I'd like to pull the contract for Pocho Sanchez digital media at this time, and so your motion would just include Luther Burbank Center and T-Tech LLC.
With the removal of the contract, I make a motion for approval of E5.
Second that.
Moved by Director Sheffield, second by Director Fong. Roll call vote, please.
Director Sheffield? Director Fong?
Aye.
Director Manieri? Director McCormick? Director Medina?
Aye.
President Close?
Aye.
Director Mackin?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries, and that brings us to F2. We are moving right along tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening, President Close, Dr. Kitamura, and members of the board.
Oh yeah, Dr. Kitamura. Got a pain in my elbow. Can you help me with that? Dun-dun-dun.
I'm flustered now. Good evening again. Tonight we're bringing forward an update on the E-rate program and asking for approval for our applications for the 2019-20 E-rate funding cycle. As some overview of the program, E-rate is a federally funded program that started in 1998 that was designed to, for the education portion, give discounts to schools for telephone long distance, internet access, network equipment, and internal network connections between sites and to the district office. E-rate's broken up into two categories. There's Category 1 funding and Category 2 funding. The Category 1 funding refers to internet access, internal network communication, telephones and long distance service. Category 2 is services that enable those connections, such as routing, switching, wireless access points and wireless network equipment. Discounts for the program are based on free and reduced lunch percentage for everyone that's in the program. So all school districts qualify for a minimum level of funding from the federal government, but school districts with higher free and reduced percentage qualify for more money. And with that, through, hold on, did we skip slide? Sorry. And the E-rate program is funded through telephone bill. So if you look at a telephone bill and you see a universal service fee of 88 cents or $1.23 on a monthly basis, or the varying amount based on your bill, that is the money that is used to fund this program. When we talk about E-rate funding for our telephone service and some of our internal network connections or wide area network connections, we entered into an AT&T contract through E-rate a few years ago for 7 years. So that's why we don't see this on an annual basis, because we always don't go for additional E-rate funding because of the long-term contract that we're in with AT&T. But for the funding process, it's very regimented in terms of the guidelines set forth from E-rate School Library Division, requiring RFPs to be posted for a minimum time frame of 28 days. Bids are received and reviewed, and then a selected vendor is presented for approval, and the application is submitted to School and Library Division of the Universal Services Administration Company. And then the fun part is not just this school district, but all school districts will sit and wait for the funding commitment decision letter, which will happen sometime between June and forever in some cases. E-rate has done a big revamp in the last couple of years to streamline their processes, so they have been seeing funding commitment decision letters come out quicker, but with even this application, we have no expectation on when those services or the commitment from E-rate will actually be delivered to us. And for right now, I'm going to let Mr. Bika, Director of Technology, talk about some of the things that are going on in our network and the reason why we're bringing these solutions forward to talk about.
Good evening, everybody. Dr. Kitamura and members of the board. Congratulations. So ever since we started the infrastructure project, I still struggle with this mic like last time. Infrastructure project in 2015, we had seen a major increase in traffic in our network, mostly on the wireless network. Right now, daily, we see at least 11,000 devices connected to our wireless network. We have an inventory of at least 12,000 student devices that we can potentially connect to our network at any moment. And on the wired network, we serve 2,000 devices as well. It's going to all come a little bit together when I do the presentation on how the network is organized. But right now, we're looking at every high school is connected to the wide area network over a 1 gigabit per second connection, and we're seeing sites at peak hours reaching 85%, which is a lot. And in the middle school area, which are, middle schools are served by 1 gigabit per second connections as well. We're seeing 70% for some middle schools, and the elementary schools, they have the smallest pipe. It's only half a gigabit per second, and with those ones, with some elementary schools, we're seeing usage of 90%. Which again, it's a lot. We currently have 2 internet connections. One is going to the County of Education, Sonoma County of Education, that is 10 gigabit per second. And we're putting 35% at peak hours on that connection. And we have a secondary internet connection with SonicNet, which is 5 gigabit per second, and we're limited there at 20% usage, as you will see. And again, everything is going to come together then when I go over the presentations. Do you want to cover this part?
This slide got out of order, I apologize. This shows some historical data on the monies received by the E-rate program that discount those services for our schools. As you can see, there's varying percentages because just like our free and reduced lunch count on an annual basis, some of their ways they fund and how they calculate their allocation also changes on an annual basis. But you can see from 1998, we've received hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to offset network infrastructure costs and telephone service costs.
So this evening, we're bringing to for the board's approval the purchase of 2 firewalls, an upgrade of a wide area network circuit with the AT&T, which would be an extension of a contract we already have with them, and under category 2 projects, a 1-hour uptime and uninterruptible power supply solution for the data center at the district office. So a little bit of an explanation here. If you look at this map here, we have the high schools and middle schools. They're connected to wide area network through the circuits I was just talking about, the 1 gigabit per second. The elementary schools are going through 0.5 gigabit per second. And the district office connects to this wide area network over a 5 gigabit. So our network, as far as we are concerned, it's includes the high school, middle schools, elementary schools, district office, and site to what you see there. Our internet access is controlled by 2 firewalls. Actually, this diagram you're seeing here is at the beginning of the project when we only had 1 internet connection. So our firewalls, the role of the firewalls is to protect our network from intrusion from the internet. We set some rules on these firewalls ourselves, and also they have some modules that are intelligent. They check with databases on the internet for threats, and then they adjust the policies themselves. So under that kind of a circumstance here, I'm representing what would have had happened if one of these firewalls would collapse, right? The traffic would be redirected to the other one. They work in a pair. They're called a high availability pair. So one of them collapses, the other one takes over. Actually, the traffic goes through both of them at the same time, but the traffic that was going for the one on the right, for example, would be shifted to the left. And then in 2015, the board approved the addition of a secondary internet connection. At that time, there was the Sonic internet connection, the 5 gigabit per second. If you look at that, from this picture, so we had to take one of the firewalls from here and assign it to the internet connection for SonicNet, because now we have 2 points of entry. So with this, we're finding ourselves in a different kind of a situation. We still have redundant connections. However, if the connection to the firewall to the DO to SCO collapses or that internet connection for whatever reason goes down, then our core services are going out and all the traffic is rerouted through the Site 2 connection to SonicNet. So technically we're not losing internet connection. The only problem is right now that connection between Site 2 and the wide area network, because now all the traffic that was going to the district office and to SCO, the 5 gigabits has to go over 1 gigabit. So that's why we need to upgrade that link there from for Site 2. And I just indicated there is the one that the one in red.
I just want to go back to this screen for just a second to point out, or this one where both firewalls are up. The reason why we brought 2 firewalls forward is because, as Adrian pointed out in a previous slide, the number of devices that has increased over the course of the last 3 or 4 years and the dependency on internet resources. A lot of our systems that we use, both in the classroom and at the district office, are based in the cloud, including our student information system, Google, which everyone uses in the district now. And if we have one firewall that fails, we cut off services not only to the district office, but to sites as well, where teachers are depending on those services to conduct class on a daily basis. People at the district office use those services to conduct their day-to-day job activities. So it was ultimately important in order to produce enough uptime that we minimize single points of failure. I do recall the last time we did speak about E-rate, we spoke about President Close's favorite subject, dark fiber. And that was that second link that went in, and we accommodated both links by splitting our high availability firewalls in order to provide security to our network. And so what this project is doing is putting in that redundancy so we minimize single points of failure with our connectivity.
All right, so this one is just, I just went over this one. All right, so the proposed solution is, number one, we need, on the secondary connection, we need 2 firewalls to have a high availability pair there. We need to upgrade that weakest link, the 1 gigabit per second to 5 gigabit per second. And we need to protect the data center equipment with uninterruptible power supply. And actually that requires a little bit of explanation itself because before I move forward, the uninterruptible power supply. So the way that one works, I look at it, there are 3 ways, 3 levels of protection for the uninterruptible power supplies. This protect in case of power failures, right? So the current solution we have implemented it's an like level 1, I call this one, protects against spikes, brownouts, and allows us to run the equipment for up to 35 minutes at this point. The second level of protection, well, so as you might imagine, when we go over the 35 minutes, then we need to shut down the equipment, right? And the UPSs themselves, they have software in them, they can gracefully shut down the equipment. That still brings us in a tough spot when we're bringing the equipment back because we need to bring in a certain sequence, and it's a lot. So what we're proposing, let me just go over these other 2 levels. The second level would be a beefier kind of uninterruptible power supply solution that enables us not only to keep the data center up and running for at least an hour, but also can keep the AC, the air conditioning up and running, because if I keep the equipment going for an hour, we might just like fry it. I just keep it up to destroy it basically. And also the second level UPS solution has an interface that we could later use to connect to a generator, a power generator, right? And then the third level is when we would actually have the power generator, and we already have the interface. We're already doing this. We'll probably have to up the battery packs a little bit at that time as well.
Thank you for bringing that point up. I'm going to stop because I might forget later on. And that is extremely important about that interface for the generator due to what happened during the wildfires.
Right.
We have to be able to access our data in order to get a hold of people,
right,
and students. And so thank you for putting that in there in terms of being able to interface with the generator.
Right. Right, and now we're looking at public safety power shutoff. You know, PG&E just announced this initiative in case, you know, that there's dry weather and high winds, they will shut down the power, so we need to protect our equipment. This hour would give us some leeway to you know, bring our equipment down and, you know, consider all other means of communication. So, all right, so this is just to show, you know, the solution after the implementation of this E-rate project. We're looking here that we can have many types of failures and we're still gonna be up and running, right? So I've just like crossed all these devices there. Right.
Well, one more thing I'd like to mention with this solution and what we're trying to accomplish beyond high availability and protecting access, the UPSs also provide uptime for our phone system and our bell clocks throughout the district. When we took those devices and centralized them, one of the weak points was the district office in terms of if we have a power failure there, that doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a power failure at all of our sites where school and services are operating normally. We also know that most power outages don't last longer than 30 to 40 minutes, and oftentimes shorter, so we wanted to be able to accommodate all of the resources that the sites would use if they weren't in the same situation that the district office was. So that is another reason why we're looking to upgrade the UPS to accommodate that phone system. For the new board members, we replaced 3 aging phone systems with 1 single phone system throughout the district, and the core of it is housed at the district office. So there are safeguards in place to allow phone service at the school sites if they lose power there, in order to have connectivity in ways out, including UPSs at the school sites, and some other technology that allows some phones to operate for a period of time without the voice over IP system that is currently in place. Another point on here that Adrian also talked about in a couple of different ways, but that link that we're looking to upgrade through the E-rate program as well. You can see from 1 gig to 5 gig, as Adrian pointed out earlier, some of our high schools are using 80 to 90% of their 1 gig now. So in order to ensure that we have the ability to have school sites go to the internet and business still being conducted in the district, we need to upgrade that link as well. So that tells the story of how we're trying to provide high availability, provide resources to the school sites in order to keep uptime there if they're not in the same power situation we are, and also to keep continuity with enough bandwidth to facilitate teaching and learning and business operations.
Yeah, and again, I just want to point out how critical that link, just a second here, that link is the weakest link that we have there, because we can split the services from the district office. We can migrate some at the site number 2 there, but the problem is if the connection, the wide area network connection to the district office collapses and we don't upgrade at 1 gigabit per second, then the traffic is just gonna get choked there. So that one is critical for us at this moment. So we made a calculation here for you know, the 2 hardware solutions here. This is going to be totaling up at $761.95. This is the total before the discount. The discount is actually almost 60%, $341.744, and the total after discount is $419,547.64. And for the monthly B, we're going to see an increase for that 5 gigabit per second connection is going to be funded 60% as well, and we're going to be paying a total of $1,077 per month. And we're open to any questions.
And with that, we'll turn it over to the board.
Thank you. Thanks for the floor. Director Medina.
Yeah, I have a few questions. First of all, just to clarify, Site 2, what is Site 2? Just because I'm not quite sure what that means. Is it like a second data center? Or?
Site 2 is our secondary data center and internet connection.
And I'm curious as to, with the UPS, is there a reason why there wouldn't be a UPS for Site 2?
Site 2, we already have UPSs there as well. And historically, that power grid, we didn't have problems with it. But we actually have a bunch of other further projects that we will have to continue on at some point. I can go over those.
So I wasn't clear. Did you say it's done as well, or?
No.
So the DO is our main center and has the most equipment, which requires a different level and a different size of UPS. There is light duplication or small duplication of services at LC Allen, where the UPSs that we have currently installed will handle the load that we need at that site.
So the Sonic connection is strictly for LC?
No.
Okay.
Right now, no, we are actually splitting the traffic between the two connections. Most of the elementary schools are going through the Site 2. High schools and most of the middle schools are going through the DO connection, just because we have that weak link there.
And in terms of thinking, just long term, why would we only upgrade that connection to 5 gigabits per second versus 10, like the SCO connection?
The traffic right now, if you add all the numbers, you look at it like this doesn't make any sense, because we have more going on. Every site has a caching server as well. So what happens there, let's say a student accesses a video, right? A YouTube video. And then the next student accesses the same one, right? The system at the school learns, okay, a lot of people are doing this. Maybe I should just download a copy of this video on the server here, and now everybody at that site is served a copy straight from the server. Therefore, we're not putting the traffic on the wide area network and on the internet connection for every single user, basically. Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, do our data centers back up to each other? Or are they?
Right. Yes, so the thinking is this right now. Once we have the internet connection we upgrade that internet connection, the weak link there, we can actually split some services that right now we have them. Again, everything is in a high availability. We have 2 machines of the same kind, for example, for the phone system, right? One collapses, another one is there, right? But the problem is they're both at the district office, where if the power goes down, then we're dead in the water, right? So what we want to do is take one of those secondary machines, move them to the secondary data center, or if we upgrade that connection, we can actually move some of these services to the cloud, right? So then it doesn't matter where they are. As long as one of the internet connections is up and running, we still have access to them, right? And then we are actually thinking of some other solutions at the site specifically to provide them some backup connections to the internet and actually going back to our data center.
Cool. Yeah. And this one's more just out of curiosity. Do we run our own DNS servers, or are those guys?
Well, yes, internally we have our own, and then externally we actually offload it to the cloud, our external DNS right now. Yeah.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? I think I had some questions about redundancy, but I'm pretty sure that they were answered. I'm not 100% sure. But right now the communication system, our new communication system, is all still centralized, and until we do this, is still vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What's the time frame on this?
We could get our funding commitment decision letter as soon as late May, June, July. They have been a lot better about getting it out closer because E-rate contracts start July 1. So they've made a concerted effort to try and get them out sooner so services can start on or about the date that school districts want them. So I would expect that sometime in the summer that we would receive the commitment decision letter and then move forward from there.
Thanks. Okay, this is an action item.
Move approval of item F2, E-rate application for 1920 funding year.
Second that.
Moved by Director Sheffield, second by Director Medina. Roll call vote, please.
Director Sheffield?
Aye.
Director Medina?
Aye.
Director Manieri?
Aye.
Director Fong? Director McCormick?
Aye.
President Close?
Aye.
Director Mackin?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, F3, discussion item, mid-year review of the ACES programs.
President Close, board members, Dr. Kitamura. Before we present my colleague here, Director Araceli Romo Flores, I want to just take a couple of appreciations. This program we've had a number of public comments for the last couple months. As part of our contracted review process, we had an annual mid-year review that we've completed, and the results were in the board packet. But I want to appreciate the time and work, first of all, of Director Romo Flores. A lot of follow-up, a lot of conversations with parents, students, and teachers. I want to appreciate the staff at the school sites who open their doors every afternoon, follow up with students that are in this program. It is a joint process, and that's one of the conversations, recommendations we'll have about it. But really, hats off to a lot of very concerned staff members that have come forward over the last couple of months and brought really important considerations to you, and we've incorporated many of those in our recommendations. With that, we'll do our report and then follow up with recommendations. Dr. Romo Flores.
Good evening, everyone. So just as a reminder, the purpose of the ACES program is to provide a safe after-school education, enrichment, and youth development program for targeted elementary and middle school students. And the Santa Rosa City Schools ACES grant has been awarded to Biela, Brook Hill, Burbank, Lehman, Lincoln, Monroe, Still Lane, Cook, and Comstock. And in the graphic or the picture there that you see, that's actually Biela's schedule, which reflects some of the offerings that Creative Brain is providing to our students. As you will recall, lots of startup concerns were expressed to us, as our Assistant Superintendent Mazzaras just pointed out, mainly around student supervision and safety due to lack of personnel or staff at the beginning of the startup of the school year, and also in some cases due to lack of training of the staff. And another concern was the provision of adequate meals. And lastly, lack of enrichment programs as promised by the vendor. So those were some of the initial concerns that were brought to our attention in September. And in all of these areas, they were rated as unsafe or inadequate and or needing improvement. So none of these areas were considered satisfactory. And since then, we have had lots of communication with Creative Brain and also with our site admin, and had some collaborative conversations around the concerns and also in terms of creating an improvement plan to address these concerns. Steve and I did site visits to monitor the program and to assess the program, and we saw some really great things and we saw some things that are still of concern. So current status, student supervision and safety, that area definitely we saw improvements. We feel that it is satisfactory now. The ratio of student to adult ratio has improved significantly at all of the sites, and that was witnessed, and we're pleased to see that. The sign-in and sign-out procedures and documentation is carried out well. We saw that evidence of that in place at all sites. The emergency card information, we saw evidence of that documentation at all sites. And we saw, we were able to witness the walkie-talkie communication that has improved as a result of having those tools. So student supervision and safety definitely has been addressed, and we're pleased to say that that area falls within the satisfactory rate now. The meal provisions or meal adequacy, that one is still of concern to us. We have it rated as a 1, unsatisfactory. And that continues to be a concern because really the poor quality of food provided. 2 days a week, they provide warm meals that are provided through the food bank. And 3 days a week, they have prepackaged meals that are provided to students. And both the students and staff have voice concern about the quality of that provision. In the enrichment programs, we rated that as a 2, needing improvement. Although that has been, I have to say, these are pictures of our actual students. So the picture with the computers here, these are students at Biella doing coding, and so they're doing coding with computers, they're doing typing, practicing their typing skills. So we're seeing some nice things that were promised. The concern mostly comes around the fact that we did see a lot of students that were not actively engaged because there weren't enough Chromebooks, or there weren't enough in terms of the music instruction. When we saw the guitar lessons, not everybody had access to a guitar, so we had some spectators versus active participants, and so that was a concern. We want to make sure that all of our students are actively engaged. But in terms of the offerings, we're pleased with the offerings. We had some concerns about not having all students have access to all of the equipment, and so that's why in that area we rated it as needing improvement.
So what we have for you all is a series of recommendations that we put in our 30-day evaluation announcement to the vendor Creative Brain. So the steps are that we have asked these recommendations happen in the next 30 days. We will be evaluating that at the conclusion of that process. So those continue to be around making sure the sign-in procedures are accurate and improving. The nutrition services, one of the things we recognize is we need to be able to do more with our own CNS program and provide some additional supports and perhaps bolster some of those meal inadequacies that we saw in the report. So we expect to do that and then have that conversation how we can improve that. The contract talked about monthly reviews and meetings with everyone. They were haphazard, both from the administrator side. That's not a blame on Creative Brain by itself, because sometimes site principals weren't initiating that, and so we want to ensure that that happens, and we address those things there. And numbers 1, 2, and 3 are kind of ongoing issues that are agendized every month. There was some communication that was unsatisfactory in the report. We want to make sure that we see at least a newsletter go out again. The one had gone out earlier in December, but we want to follow that up and make sure another one goes out for communication. We think we need to improve on our technology aspect, both in terms of adequately getting into our literacy program and using intervention programs and other software that we have at school, and we're going to discuss with principals about making sure that the computer ratios are appropriate and that there is access. That access also applies into music. There are some musical programs that could be available on the right kind of computer, and so they can use those resources if they're shifting from, say, instrumental to other music design and other things that are available on the internet. We also want to make sure that there is a strong homework program, and that we did not find that Creative Brain had access to the students' regular portals and could go online and find out where their homework problems were, or adequately communicated with teachers. Steve is having a problem. He says he doesn't have any homework. That communication to that child's teacher immediately, what's going on? Steve says he doesn't have any homework. So we want to make sure that communication is stronger. And so we will devise this by April 27th. There's some behavior goals that we want to put into there. A progressive level of discipline that encourages the restorative practices as well. And then we'll meet with them at the end of April to review this 30-day guidelines, and at that point, we'll be making judgment on whether or not we think there's adequate process. And with that, you see here that we are gonna meet Friday with Creative Brain, outlining this 30-day evaluation system, answer any questions they may have, meet within 30 days. At the same time, we have an agenda item following this to discuss about developing an RFP to explore other options, what may be available, and we hope to bring that recommendation to the board by the early May 1st board meeting. And with that, we'll take any questions from the board.
Thank you. First, I have a blue card. Becky Ennis, you said it says F3/F4. Do you want to talk at F3 or F4 or both? Well, I don't know where parent comment fits into this. Right here. Right now.
Okay. Thank you, Jenny. Hi, my name is Becky Ennis. Thank you for your time. I'm a parent. My daughter attends Luther Burbank Elementary School. And I would just like to say that you guys have discussed Burbank so highly tonight, and I would love to see an after-school program that matches that same caliber, but unfortunately it is very substandard. I will just politely remind President Close and Member Sheffield that I did email at the beginning of the year regarding my concerns, and so the fact that I'm here tonight, I think, demonstrates that there are still some serious concerns with the program, and I felt like a lot of parents voiced my concerns at the beginning, but now I feel like it needs to be said. There are too many observations in my mind to mention in a 3-minute time period. In a nutshell, there's a gross lack of staff, training, support for staff, supervision of the children, programming. Everything that Mr. Mazzara mentioned is still continuing. In regards to the sign-in and out sheet, yes, they've improved, but no one greets me when I come to pick up my child. No one asks me what my name is. This afternoon, I just picked up my daughter. The woman I did not recognize. I see a different person every day at Burbank, and my daughter doesn't know who works there most of the time except the director. On February 28th, my daughter received a behavior report. It's this. It's the first piece of communication that I've received from the Burbank site. Well, first communication regarding my daughter. It's the second piece of communication that I received from the site. The first piece was just a phone number as to who to reach in case I couldn't get there by 6 o'clock, and that came from the director. This document is not filled out completely. I don't necessarily even understand from reading it what the next steps are. And what really concerns me is that it's the content of the incident. This was regarding my daughter watching an online content called Momo, which if you haven't seen her, she's a creepy little cartoon character that encourages children to have self-harming behaviors, suicide, etc. And my problem with this is that there was a complete lack of a teaching moment. This is a serious concern that I think the entire program should have addressed. And what I found out later was that kids were just told, get off of your phones. We got a little note that said we're a no cell phone site, and that was it. And they were kind of sent on their way. There's really nothing here that speaks to what they discussed and how to be safe on the internet with all of the children. So I'm not really here to debate whether or not that this Momo thing is real or whether or not my daughter should have been disciplined. I have spoken with Mr. Mazzara. I have written him an email. I have spoken with Ralph, I think his last name is Hernandez, from Creative Brain. I don't feel like we are in a good place even after I don't know how many months within the school year. These next steps are great to see, but again, I'm just not confident that this is going to be fixed.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it for the blue cards. We have questions, comments from the board. Director Sheffield and then Director McCormick.
Thank you for the presentation. I do want to have a couple questions, I guess, on student supervision. I strongly believe that a rating of satisfactory is not acceptable because safety is the #1 priority here. I'm wondering, what are the current student to adult supervision ratios?
So they are, in the state program, it's 20 to 1. And so on a given day, that's what they're supposed to have. So you saw some average attendance by school sites, and so at that ratio, they should be having 3 to 4 people available on site from Creative Brain staff.
And then and something, of course, as I said before, I don't think a satisfactory in this case is something that I'm okay with. Okay. We just heard from a parent. I would feel the same way, absolutely. And bringing forward these concerns to us, I guess in this way, in a rating system, I just feel that should be a #1 priority focus. I mean, we have the other issues, the meals and the lack of enrichment programs, and I know that these are things that we can work on, and in both those instances, we had an even worse overall rating. Which brings me to my second issue, which is the adequate meals, and we know that for many of the students here, this is they're receiving their nutritional source from this program. We currently have the provider being the food bank, and as was indicated in the report, was that on hot meal days, the food arrives after 3 p.m. It just seems to me like this is something that can be worked out. Is it a transportation issue? Is it?
There are some issues, as we work with Creative Brain on, there's some issues with the food bank, related to the food bank and how they have, and the timing of their hot food and when it can come out. They're also going under some kind of evaluation process, and there's been some hiccups for what they're able to provide and when and how. So the issues seem to be related to food bank, and that's why we mentioned and we had conversations that we need to figure that out, because those problems shouldn't interfere with your program, particularly the homework structure of your
I mean, that throws the rest of the day off, really.
It does.
And it's in the hot meal days. Those are a couple days a week, 2 days a week.
2 days a week at this point.
I have other questions, but I'll wait.
Director McCormick and then Director Fong.
I would like to echo, I had similar questions that you had, and I feel the same as you, Director Sheffield. My first question is, well, I'm very concerned about this. When I saw your report and the subpar evaluation, this is like a red flag for me. Both my boys were in an after-school program, and I did not feel that these issues were present. I felt that they were safe. The check-in was pretty methodical and rigorous, and even though we all got to know each other really well, there was consistency in staff and consistency in who was picking up the kids, and still there was this very regimented process. So as a parent, that was very reassuring, and I felt very confident about that. And if there's parents not feeling confident about that I agree. We need to fix that, #1, right off the bat. My first question is, if we're having issues with adequate staffing and we don't, I assume that means we don't have enough staffing, is that correct? Correct. Is that our issue or Creative Brain's issue? Why do we have inadequate staffing? They can't get trained people? Like, what's the issue there?
Well, I think there are several issues. So the workforce has been really depleted in Sonoma County. I don't know if that's a result of the fires. I'm not sure what it's attributed to. But to Creative Brain's credit, they are paying substantially higher salary or wage, hourly wage to their employees because they're desperate to recruit. And so they did do a lot of effort, made a lot of effort to increase their hourly rate. They pay their employees more than any other after-school provider does, significantly more. So that did draw in some people that interested in the position. And so I think when I observed the sites, the ratios were actually low. I'm a little concerned. I want to make sure that we have our attendances, that we're doing some outreach and getting more students involved, because all the visits that I made, there were quite a few adults to the student. And so there's a possibility to grow it. And we also have to make sure that we have the, adequate attendance, or we can lose our funding. So So that was a concern as well. But really the concern is just the hiring pool in Sonoma County. It's been a challenge. I mean, even within our district, we have a lot of positions that we haven't been able to fill just because the workforce is very depleted.
Okay. My next question is access to equipment. I do think that after-school programs are ripe for enrichment opportunities, and we can generically throw that term around, but I think we need to take it very seriously since we're constantly in a fight and a struggle to keep the arts and music and PE in our actual curriculum. This is another opportunity to do that in a different form. And so my question on the access to equipment is that because of funding, lack of access to getting, like, why is there a lack of equipment? What is that?
In most of the cases, the creative brain is in charge of their own equipment, and that's how we wrote the contract. Okay. And so that's an issue. The equipment that we've seen in for coding, as an example, is some older equipment that are on our Wi-Fi network that becomes problematic occasionally with non-district computers being on the Wi-Fi networks. And so they've sporadically had issues of access, certainly in the computer. Their computers don't have access to some of our software systems, and our programs that we have, say in the computer lab, are on a Chrome card. So that's part of the access that I'm describing. And that's how we wrote that contract, that they were to provide their own.
And the same for the musical instruments or PE equipment, or?
So they did have enough equipment. There were a lot of, and I know it's going to happen because there's students that are learning to play some of the equipment. So we had a lot of equipment that was just broken and needed repair and hadn't been repaired yet. And so, but again, in order to make sure that we have minimal discipline problems, minimal, that we're maximizing our time with them, we need to make sure that there's some alternate activities for students and not just observing, inspecting, and kind of not engaged. So that was a concern. But they did initially have enough equipment, but there were repairs that needed.
It's not being maintained.
Exactly.
Okay. And the last thing about the homework, you talked about better connection and service during the homework time. Does Creative Brain provide their staff training in like specific tutorial techniques so that the staff is actually capable of effectively tutoring them on their homework? Is that part of it?
I don't know if I could speak to that directly. They go through a number of trainings. I don't know if there's something specific to tutorial. I've seen them in work in music. I've seen them in work in some of the scratch coding. In terms of tutorial and that's under the category of educational literacy. I cannot speak to that. I can find that out and get that back to the board.
Okay, thank you. Director Fong.
Thanks for this update. Question, is Creative Brain a nonprofit or a for-profit company?
I don't know. Yeah, we have a representative. It is a nonprofit corporation.
When we put out the RFP for companies to apply for this, was the technology part of us, the school district supplying the computers and the Chromebooks? Was that part of the agreement, or did the companies need to come with their own?
As we wrote the RFP, they were to come with their own.
I just heard you, though, say that we had to supplement because there weren't enough. Is that correct?
No, I think it's a recommendation that we look at supplementing because it's not enough and it's not giving them the access that they need.
The ACES grant, is that an attendance-based grant where we need to show attendance and get?
We do quarterly attendance reports.
If we're talking about policy and we're talking about the disconnect between an outside provider coming into our classrooms, right, and using some of our equipment by necessity and working with our students and their homework and like that, the disconnect is that they don't have that kind of access to what the kids are learning, how they're learning it, what they need to do, technology, the Wi-Fi. So there's an issue, a disconnect of an outside company coming in and using our facilities, working with their children, yet there's still big walls between what they can provide, how they can provide. And so I don't know, this is, an outside company is the best fit versus whether we can provide after school. How can we, and I don't know how the grant works, but that's coming up to my brain right now. So I will say that when I look at what an outside company needs to provide, that is a really skilled set for after-school providers who are working at some lower wage, I think, than teachers, right? Yeah. There's science education, there's coding, there's music, there's a lot of stuff there that I don't know how one person or a few providers at a site can provide. So I'm not even sure this is really a great fit in terms of how we really look at after-school enrichment and how we provide that for students. And that's not the question on the table today, but just thinking about that.
I do want to mention, though, that they have a rotation. So they have music teachers that rotate. So it's not a fixed schedule for the entire year. So like they'll have piano, like keyboarding on the piano. They'll do like guitar, recorders. So they do have traveling teachers for some of those enrichment pieces, so that it's kind of cyclical. So that's kind of some of the reason why there isn't consistency in staff in for some of this, just because they have like their coding expert or their coding kind of specialist and music specialist.
Thank you for explaining that.
Director Medina.
Yes, I think I was kind of, well, I do share some of Dr. Fong's concerns. I think just initially, if the contract initially is to provide their own equipment, this recommendation of us sharing access to our computer labs and Chrome cards to me is concerning, just because then I think there's additional cost to us, and then are we paying, are we doing part of what they're supposed to provide? So that is concerning to me. On the recommendation about access to information about students, I'm just, in relation to that recommendation, I'm curious about privacy and any privacy-related laws that may be associated with sharing of that information. And I imagine some sort of MOU would have to be created around that. Could you touch base on how that may work? Or
yeah, we haven't explored that with the vendor directly, what that might mean. One of the things we're just wondering, we're just trying to get access to, if not any district software, just perhaps to start off to make sure we have their computers and we can access the system so they can use their existing software, which is primarily in the cloud anyway, but just have adequate resources and adequate software. So in the big picture, what I want to also kind of say here in the balance of is this is a program funded by the federal government that it is for students that are underserved at underserved locations that need intervention. And when I look at that, and kind of perhaps getting back to Director Fong's idea, we need to develop a partnership where this works. We want these students to be successful and have an intervention program. That's the primary source around this. If this vendor's not working, looking at, Director Fong, you're discussing potentially owning it ourselves. I think we need to come to some solutions. We don't want this to fail. I think we are at a critical point, and then in the F4 item, I'll speak to that, but we need to develop a balance here as for the workforce issues that were addressed, the type of program that involves. If we want that to succeed, we may have to kind of try to find a balance. And that's kind of what we're seeking in the next item, to see if there is something else out there that maybe serve these needs. But when we approved this vendor last year, we liked the idea of their enrichment programs. We researched that they were satisfactory at other locations, and we did our homework on those. And when they were in place, they thought it was hands above any other program that they've had. So we clearly are not there. We are not satisfied with that. There are the trajectory may be in the right direction, but I think there's still some considerations we all have to consider to see about being successful.
And in terms of the staffing or recruitment, I am curious, it sounds like they're doing a good job in terms of like what they pay folks, but I don't really necessarily know what other programs pay. Can we get an idea exactly like what they start folks at?
I believe it's like I believe it's between $12 and $13 an hour. And we're paying, Creative Brain is paying some other staff $22 an hour, up to 22.
So 22 is what they pay, and other programs pay 12 and 13.
Yeah.
Okay,
and follow up, in our own childcare, our store, we have an after-school childcare program that's a fee for service. At some of our other sites, our starting wage in that is $12.50 an hour, and we have a difficult time filling those positions. We have wait lists at most of those after-school programs, and it's around our workforce problems, and we can't find people at those wages.
And the other thing, I think in this recommendation around the philosophy statement, in relation to behavioral goals, I don't know if any of our restorative justice philosophy is what you have in mind here.
It is, absolutely. So
okay.
that's I think one of the things we're missing. The RFP talked about integrating with our disciplinary system. What Mrs. Innes was describing is, I think, a lack of using our integrated process of progressive discipline, clear notification, and perhaps a restorative practice around it. So that's, I think, an example of what we need to make sure that they're providing to us.
And I do want to just clarify another piece, because I know that Creative Brain has traditionally hired students from universities that are pursuing a teaching credential. That's who they target to run these after-school programs. And because Sonoma State and the JCs started after we did, it was really hard to even seek out those individuals or know who they were, or even recruit them. So that was also a challenge for them.
And the last thing that I had was just, I think one of the issues that you mentioned was an issue was just access to maybe the internet connection or whatever, and I don't know if that's, a combination of miscommunication from both ends, our side and theirs, not working together, but I think with, as we move forward, I think really working together with, whether it be them or some of the contractor, we get a hold of that from the start, because that seems to be really important.
Very good, absolutely.
Director Sheffield.
Something you just said about the program starting after the opportunity to reach out to college students who would traditionally do this. I think that's a great idea. I didn't see that in the recommendation to maybe move forward. I think that, for a college student, $22 an hour, I think that's a pretty good deal, especially if it's something that they can apply towards their education, their experience exactly. And maybe that is part of the discussion moving forward with Creative Brain on that front. We have a nice pool of a college and a university right here.
I think that's their common practice, and that's what they've done in their Southern California sites, which is why they've had success there. And I think that was just one of the drawbacks for our program, is that our timing was off.
So, I guess with the lack of available staff, I'm wondering, is it tied to their budget, or is it just because they're not finding available staff? I guess I'm just wondering, are they cutting corners? Are they, is there any indication of that? Or I don't know.
It's a good question.
They have been very flexible in the rates and
I appreciate the rates, and especially here in Sonoma County.
Absolutely.
Cost of living, absolutely.
Right.
And my kids in an after-school program as well, and I know it doesn't pay nearly the rate that Creative Brain pays their staff. But that's a question that I'm curious about.
The financial viability of the program is a concern in the county, I believe, because it's only a fixed amount of dollars that they're getting from the state. So that's a cap. As these salaries go up, it either comes out of somewhere else or it is not sustainable. And so it's an issue that we may have to address in a next year's contract. There are other ACES programs, as an example, that have a fee-for-service scale. Parents that may not be in a free reduced program and then pay a certain amount toward the program. Sure. And that's a model we haven't used. That may be something we continue, and that may be something we put forward in the next agenda item.
Okay, thank you.
Director Fong.
So some of the problems that you're describing seems to me that it would be any program that would do this would have it. So the question for me, and you don't really have to answer this, but I'm sure you're thinking about it, is so Creative Brain, it feels like they overpromised. But also, how are they working with our district now in terms of meeting their obligations and getting better and better? So that's what we'll be waiting for the next report, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know that you have been busy with this since Creative Brain took over and doing your best to, I think, put out a lot of fires and figure out what to do next. And it does seem, there was a reason why this RFP went out when it did, and that's because for a long time our district was dissatisfied with our after-school provider in that they were not providing enrichment activities. And that was not, that's true in our district, and I have heard the same thing with respect to our, former provider in other districts. And that was a problem, and we needed better enrichment activities. We thought that was important. And so, it went out to RFP. The results were very clear. I know you guys did your homework. You went to the other sites. Creative Brain was far and away, got the highest scores. YMCA with a close second, and then former provider a distant third, and so it seems like it was a reasonable decision at the time. And so here we are here now, where it doesn't seem like it's working out all that great. And one of the real telltales is that I know we had a waiting list going in, and now we're under enrolled, and people vote with their feet. And when we go from saying we have a problem with not getting great enrichment to we have a problem with our kids being safe, that's a whole. That's a real low bar now. We just want, before we wanted more enrichment, now we just want people to be safe first and foremost. But ultimately, we need to bring it back. And I do think, I think the turnover was a problem. The turnover maybe to an agency that was out of town didn't have some of the same connections, although there is a workforce problem, and it has been exacerbated. And that is, as Director Fong said, I mean, that's going to be an ongoing problem. And so what, one of the things that the other thing that I really worry about is that I think that our teachers are picking up a lot of slack here. When it's out of control, the teachers who are there after school trying to get ready for the next day, they're helping out, and that's a problem too. Yeah, in their classroom. So we need a solution to this. But so obviously we have to go out for an RFP, and if there's a transition, if Creative Brain can't, improve the way that we need them to. My question is, can we build into the RFP and then the contract something that says we need to see your plan for staffing. We need you to have a timeline for creating relationships with the JC, relationships with Sonoma State, relationships with other similar agencies to make sure that you're staffed up, and some kind of intermediate benchmarks so that we can keep track and not wait until August 16th or whenever we start school and say, holy mackerel, it's another train wreck. So I feel like that's something that we really need to think about is how do we not, if Creative Brain can improve and staff up and meet these expectations, then great, we just want it to be a successful program. But if we have to do another transition, we don't want to have, just a different flavor of train wreck. So how can we be proactive in ensuring that a next transition is better?
Well, President Close, could I take that and roll into F4 then, and take that as one of the things you'd like to see in moving forward on the RFP?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So on that item on the RFP, the other thing that we would like to go out with basically the same RFP we did last year. We're looking for that feedback.
I'm going to stop you because I want to speak to before we go to the RFP. Sorry about that. The answer to your questions are yes, we can definitely include those in. I think that, and I heard some other things about could we run the program ourselves. We've talked about that. The issue with that is the same thing that Creative Brain is facing, and that is a workforce issue. Not that we aren't going to explore it. The other thing is that, remember, this is a one-year contract, and I think that staff is bringing forward the RFP at this time is very smart. As you've said, these concerns have been happening all year. A month to correct something that's been going on all year, you know, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough, just to be very honest with you. So we need to be prepared to go out for the RFP right now so that we can ensure that we have enough candidates to pick from, such that we won't be behind the 8 ball like we were last year. So I think that's important to know. And the last thing I'm gonna say is that Assistant Superintendent Mazzara and Director Romo Flores have done something that's never been done on our after-school programs in terms of evaluation for as long as I've been here, and I know back before, and that is an evaluation that went to the depth and level that they went to. Is it enough? I'm gonna say no. We're gonna improve it. We're gonna do, you know, we're gonna improve it based on some of the things that President Close said. But I will tell you, it's very difficult to bring before the board anything that is negative, right? But it's important that we bring forward the truth. And so I want to commend them for doing that, and that it's the right thing to do based on observations, interviews, everything you folks did in order to bring an assessment forward, because it's what we have to do. So I commend you for that and for pushing to bring the RFP this meeting instead of next. So I'll let you go, Steve.
So with that, what we'd like to do is open an RFP window that we've done before. We're gonna open the window on April 1st with board approval. We'll use the same elements that we did last year. We'll then take feedback on any of the additional elements as we move forward. One of the elements we will add is just an evaluation about the previous relationship with the district. That could include a previous vendor that we had and what they did with us and how they worked with us. So that'll be one of the evaluation criteria that we'll add to it. What we anticipate to add in the panel, last year we had members from our district office, we had site principals, we expect to add parents and staff members, some of the classroom teachers, to help us evaluate that process. And that window, the timing of that will also be concurrent to the 30-day improvement plan. So at the end of the month, we expect to see if in fact there are any vendors that want to pick up that portion of the contract. So that is one of the things we're looking for here. Is there someone else that thinks they can meet all those demands that we've described in this workforce issue? And so that's important for us in our ultimate evaluation of where we are with the contract. So I'd like any feedback on any other RFP items that we'd like to include with that, and then we'll go forward.
Director Sheffield?
Thank you. I'm wondering, going back to the safety issues, safety concerns, and the way that they do the sign-in. I'm not sure how these sites do operate a sign-in. Is it just a sheet where a parent comes in? I know at my kid's school at Proctor, they have a fingerprint scanner. They're not that expensive. They're really not that expensive. I just priced it at $30. Okay. I'm wondering if something like that could be incorporated.
Okay, we will look at that. Thank you.
Any others? For me, it's the benchmarks that from the moment they get the contract, just, you know, unfortunately, and you guys all have enough to do, but it's clear that we need to kind of keep a tight leash on this for a while until we have a program that is reliable and reliably safe, and because we're not even kind of back up to where we were before, which was just generally dissatisfied with the content of the program.
Safe but dissatisfied.
Yeah, so that, and safe but dissatisfied is, I think we'd all agree, is better. So unfortunately, sadly, yeah. So to me, it's some kind of benchmarks. That's or requiring some kind of plan that is really defined by time and very specific as to how they plan to meet these challenges, and not just workforce, building the workforce, but then also training the workforce, because I know there's two parts of that too.
Very good. Okay, and this is action item.
This is an action item.
I move that we approve going out for an RFP for the after-school education and safety program provider for 2019-2020.
I'll second.
Moved by Director McCormick, second by Director Sheffield. Roll call vote, please.
Director McCormick?
Aye.
Director Sheffield?
Aye.
Director Manieri? Aye. Director Fong?
Aye.
Director Medina?
Aye.
President Close?
Aye.
Director Mackin?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you for all your work on this. All right, so F5, FICMAT. Discussion item, FICMAT final letter.
Good evening again, President Close, Superintendent Kitamura, members of the board. Tonight I am joined by Stacy Spector, Assistant Superintendent, and Michelle Giacomini, Deputy Executive Officer for FICMAT, to discuss the final letter from the FICMAT office. As a few of you may recall, in December of 2016, we entered into an agreement with FICMAT to review business operations and human resources operations in Santa Rosa City Schools. In the spring of 2017, they visited the district to conduct field work, including interviews with employees and looking at business and HR practices. And they issued their initial recommendations in the late spring of 2017. As many of you are aware, we've gone through some changes in business services and HR over the last couple of years. So with Stacy taking over in HR and me taking over in business services, we went back and went through the FICMAT report that was presented in 2017. We had a meeting with Michelle last summer and went over progress that had taken place prior to our arrivals in those positions with the staff that was currently there. At that point, our respective staff came up with their own action plans and implementation plans to further or to move forward on the recommendations from FICMAT that were relevant and would provide value to our organization. Earlier this year, Michelle and I believe one other member from FICMAT came back and did follow-up field work, including interviews and again looking at some of our business practices and HR practices. And she has submitted her final letter for review. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Giacomini to discuss her letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, there's a button there, sorry. Thank you for having me here this evening. I believe the last time I was here, April 2017, wow. Not all of you were here, so I'll just describe FICMAT a little bit, the process that we went through, and then bring you up to today. The first thing I want to say is what a difference 2 years makes. For those of you that were here 2 years ago, I kind of did some lecturing. I mean, I think I explained I have 6 boys, I'm used to lecturing, and it was kind of a disappointing report because there were a lot of recommendations. And so I do want to start out very positively with saying, wow, there were 51 recommendations in the report, April 2017. And I have to tell you that of those 51 recommendations, all but 9 have either been fully or partially implemented. That's incredible. So you just need to know that your staff has done an incredible job on that. Honestly, I working for FICMAT, end up giving a lot of reports that aren't always like, yay. And so this is really exciting to me to do a follow-up report that really has been taken seriously and see the improvement, because it will only help you as a district. Because as you know, human resources and business services, or just the people part, of the business as we serve students in this great area of Santa Rosa is such a big part of your budget, and the processes and procedures that go along with that are really what we're talking about. So you need to feel really good about the attention that your superintendent and business staff and HR staff have put into this effort, because I don't see that each and every day. So FCMAT, for those of you that don't know, is a statewide organization put into existence in the in 1992, when a district actually needed a state loan. And that at the time was Richmond School District, now West Contra Costa School District. And so there were districts that needed loans before that, but at that time, a change happened in the state of California where more attention was put to fiscal solvency issues and knowing that it needed to be different. So there's a whole process that goes along with that, and I won't bore you with that, but the exciting part about AB 1200 that happened in 1992, that an agency called FCMAT came into existence. And so we are a statewide independent entity, very small, 21 employees that work statewide. There's only about half of that are field staff like me that work in districts, county offices, charter schools, and community colleges each and every day with teams or individually, but that help them do better. Sometimes we have to get involved in entities that are close to running out of money and need state intervention, and I'm actually working in one of those right now, and it's the worst part of my job. But the best part of my job is being allowed to go out and provide professional learning and what we call management assistance, which is what this job was, to make recommendations for entities to do better so they don't get to that point of needing fiscal help so that they don't become insolvent. So that's really cool. You guys have had your own fiscal issues through years, right? And as we look at your interim reports, things have gotten a lot better, and that's really good. I live in Petaluma, so I read the paper and I know what's going on, and I actually pick up the phone once in a while, and you should feel proud of those efforts as well. But that's really why you asked us to come in the first place, because processes and procedures needed to be looked at, and when fiscal issues are happening and you are qualified and a qualified certification for some time on your interim reports and having problems doing your current +2, you start to look at policies and procedures, because if those aren't going well, you're probably not doing well fiscally. So that's what started this whole thing. So when we were here 2 years ago, we did look at a number of areas. I was here with the team and came out with a very long report with the recommendations. And at that time, your superintendent was smart enough to see the clause in the report that said if a request was made within the first 6 months, that we would come back and do a follow-up for free. That's why I'm here. And not all superintendents catch that part of the clause. And because I like your superintendent, I think I might have even shown her that clause. And so I'm here. So, and I don't do that for everyone. So that's really good. And so I did come back, looked at it, looked at the 51 original recommendations, asked for documentation and information before I came in, and both of these two wonderful people to my left supplied all of that, working with their staff, looked at a lot of stuff, looked at the documentation, the proof of progress, because believe it or not, I don't just listen to people when they tell me that they've done something. And in some cases, I didn't always agree with what they said was implemented or partially implemented, or some things that they said they hadn't implemented at all I didn't agree with either. I thought they had made more progress than they were giving themselves credit for. So that's what I do. I go through the stuff, and then I come to the district. I actually was here alone, but I guess I worked so hard I look like two people. But I interviewed people, looked at more documents, and then wrote the follow-up letter. So as I said, there were 51 original recommendations. 29 of those actually were implemented during this time frame, which is amazing. 13 of those are in progress, and 9 of those were not implemented. And 9 may seem high for not implemented, but it doesn't mean that nothing was done on those. There are reasons for some of those, which I explain in the report. 4 of those 9 actually will never be implemented, because there's a different path that's been decided. So it not being implemented doesn't necessarily mean that it was ignored. It's just something else is going to be done, and I do explain that in the letter. The others are because there just hasn't been enough time to do it yet. One, for instance, has to do with, just to give you an example, with budget revisions actually being done in sites and departments versus information being sent to the budget department and them inputting the budget revision. So there are plans to do that differently, actually January 2020, I believe, and so that will get better, just they haven't been able to implement that yet. Some of the others haven't been done, plain and simply there are internal control issues, and some, I believe, additional staff is needed in the accounts receivable area, but because of funding and fiscal issues, that has not been something that you've been able to look at or consider at this point. Doesn't mean that it's off the table, and I would recommend that it come up still as you continue on. I know there's only one pot of money, but when it comes to internal control issues, that would always continue to concern me. So that's some of the other not implemented. And again, there is information in the letter, and I know that you've read it or will read it, so I don't have to go through that in full detail. But I'm putting those examples out because of the 9 that say not implemented, there are reasons or just a decision that that's not the way we're going to do it. Another had to do with payroll, the way that we suggested that payroll be split or not split between certificated and classified. At the time we were here, your business department had so many open positions, it was frightening. And so at that time, we made recommendations thinking that might make it easier to fill some of these positions. Now that the positions have been filled with the staff that you have filled them with, and it looks like their experience, that recommendation doesn't necessarily need to be followed anymore, because the regular split that most school districts do, splitting certificated and classified, is still how you're doing it, but you were able to fill that with staff that are experienced, so it makes more sense now. So anyway, those are of the 9. You need to know that even for those items that are in progress, they definitely are in progress. Training, cross-training, documentation, all of those are really on their way. Things being reconciled better, wow, really good. The last thing that's actually one of the not implemented has to do with reconciling Frontline, which is your attendance system that staff use, actually being able to have a reconciliation of that back to leave slips, because that, believe it or not, is still a manual process, kind of. But that's not just here in Santa Rosa. I spend a lot of time in other districts, and we just aren't very quick with automating some of this. It's horrible to say, but I think, you know, with local control and the way that we all do things a little bit differently, we use a lot of different financial systems and human resources systems, and a lot of this isn't automated well. And so if you believe it or not, most school districts are having to do that kind of on their own with their county office, and so we're all going at a different speed. And when it comes to payroll, leave requests, even position forms that are used for position control, we're really slow, unfortunately, throughout the state. You're using an escape financial system, and that's getting better. What you have on your side here in Sonoma County is you do work closely with your county office, so it's not like you're just alone trying to do this. You are trying to do this with your county office, because in Sonoma County, I think all districts now are on escape, if not most, and so they're all trying to bring this to the forefront. You are the largest district in Sonoma County, so what you do often helps the rest of the districts, because you really need it badly because you're big, and so that is also helping the rest of Sonoma County, so that's a good thing for all of them as well. But there is a lot of work underway, and so even though in a perfect world we would hope that all 51 of these recommendations were implemented, you need to feel good that the progress that has been made is remarkable, and so you know, it's pretty amazing, and I feel really good about it for you. So I'm not gonna really go through all of the recommendations and just ask if you have any questions. I'd be happy to go through them with you.
Questions? Director Medina.
I was just looking at the whole section on job descriptions, and a lot of it says in progress, but a lot of them seem very similar.
They are.
I'm wondering, do we have a dedicated staff person that's just focusing on that? It seems like it might be a lot of spec updates, I don't know, possible reclassifications, I don't know.
Director Medina, we don't have a dedicated staff member for that. The HR techs work as a team, and there's also process that goes along contractually, both with CSEA and SRTA when we look at job descriptions and reclassifications. There's also a legal process for that. So for right now, I would say no, there's not a dedicated person, but we're constantly looking at job descriptions to make sure that they are relevant and recognize the actual work that needs to be done, and they describe the roles and responsibilities, and that they meet any statute as well.
And if I can just add to that, I believe that you are working with an outside company to help with that, but you still have contractual parts because of collective bargaining agreements and processes that you have to go through. The state that you've found yourself in as a district with job descriptions is one that I think earlier I heard that 4 job descriptions were brought forward, so you're making progress. I believe that you're at a point working with an outside company and staff working with them that you'll be able to hopefully get the classified job descriptions all up to date and then keep them up to date after that. That's the goal. I just think a lot of these have been so out of date that it's taken a while to get it caught up. But once you get there, it should be easier to keep caught up. You don't have job descriptions for certificated employees. You know, some districts do, you know, a lot don't, so that's not so much the issue, and then it would be management positions. So, but the progress is being made, and I believe, and I'm not offering to come back in a year, but I believe, and I'm not, I believe that if I did come back in a year, I would see a lot of progress there, because I see the momentum building up.
Other questions? Director Sheffield.
And just a quick question on automating systems. You said that this is an issue that, you know, districts across the state face, and I'm wondering what are the successes that districts have had. And, you know, as you said before, we're kind of a leader. We are the largest district in the county. But, you know, what can we do to sort of, I guess, pave the way for all of us?
Right, well, it costs money, right? So that's what's hard, right? Because these, for instance, I'll just give you an example. Vallejo Unified School District, which I just spent time in, actually looking at human resources and then operations. I've done the human resources review. They just got what they call their Form 6, but it's their employee change form. I forget what you call it here. They just got it automated, and they've been working on it for 18 months. But they have finally gotten to a point that a form can be entered online, and it will feed into the escape system. It takes a lot of time. You guys are actually working on that now with Sonoma County Office of Ed, so I believe that you're gonna be there in the next 6 months. I think that's the plan, but it takes, this is the problem, to be honest. It takes a lot of time from staff to test it and make sure it works right, because you don't want to initiate it till it really works right. So what it really takes is time and money for the escape part, and then employee time to really test it correctly.
So are we there then on the money part, at least on the escape part? I mean, in regards to the system itself, not necessarily the staff time, the staff money to do it.
Are you asking if we have enough money to do it with escape? I want to make sure the context of your question. Okay, so one thing that I'll touch on that Michelle was referring to is there's been a lot of in-process in terms of automation. The district was still basically on an X card system not too long ago, it felt like. And so we've taken steps to automate some things in HR as well as business services. We've also worked with Sonoma County Office of Education on features and functionalities of escape that were not being used in Sonoma County that are part of the system. So there's not necessarily a large cost to us or additional cost to us to use that system through SCO, but it's never been implemented anywhere in Sonoma County using the system that we use. So there's feature and functionality that other COEs are using with their school districts that have not been used in Sonoma County. So we're working with them to automate things that should stay in one system and go through an approval path for the check and balance and the accountability things that we're also looking to improve. You know, even something simple as a budget transfer, right? We're not doing it, initiating it at the school side and have an automated workflow process. That's something that we're working on implementing that is available now, but we're getting the workflows together and then having to conduct training to pass that responsibility down so that we can actually have that approval process. There's other things that we've worked with where I don't know if it was never asked for or wasn't perceived as a need that they didn't implement with the escape system in Sonoma County. So there's a lot of conversation going on. I know at the county office, there's a lot of conversation going on between the county office and us and some other districts. They're all interested in doing this. So they're coming up with their best method for implementation. And that will be to the benefit of everyone that uses the system. And being totally biased, it'll help us, right? And that's the primary focus.
I think the money issue here is a people issue. So it's not the escape software itself, because it's
not
owned.
the investment.
It's not the investment in the software. It's the investment in everyone working together. It wasn't really pushed for before. I mean, that takes leadership and vision of your administration, and I think they're finally asking for it. You've got the right people in place to ask for it. So now it's the investment in time and people to do it. Sure. And unfortunately, that's not overnight, but again, the progress that's been made there. You were so far behind as a district in this area. It was bad. Yeah. So even the things that I've seen happen in the last 2 years, not an escape necessarily, I mean, it's starting. Some of this isn't happening through escape yet, but some of the Band-Aids and trying to get there, it's really amazing what you've done in the last 2 years. It still seems incredibly slow to outsiders because it's hard to understand why we wouldn't be further along in some of this. It's crazy, right? I mean, my husband works for Nokia, and I talked to him about this stuff because he does systems, and he just can't believe some of the stuff I say with the paper that we still use in schools. But know that you are getting there because you have the right people pushing
We've got a Rick. You know,
yeah.
And Stacy, we have a team.
No, I mean, but that's what it takes, right? And a doctor, because we know the software and we know it can do it, but now it takes that vision and pushing to do it. And you're getting there. I mean, it seems slow still, but you really have made incredible progress.
Thank you.
Director Fong.
School systems are incredibly fossilized, and I commend Dr. Kitamura and her team for the work, for the brave look at our internal workings to be made public. And when we got this report back in April 2017, which I just remembered, yes, I was here, it was like, holy smokes, this is a long list. We are a mess. And I know I wanted a report back, so I'm really glad that you're here to explain it, and you did a really very, very clear explanation in the letter. So commendations all around. In terms of transparency and in terms of efficiencies and making sure that we are operating peak efficiency to serve our students and our families. Thank you, everyone.
Dr. Medina.
First, just for clarification, can you give like a real basic definition of position control just to help me understand?
Sure. Think of position control as a three-legged stool. Okay, how basic is that? So think of it that, so you have, one leg is actually getting the position itself authorized, and that's really the board. The board has to approve all new positions, right? And then you have the human resources side that actually puts people into the position once they're hired. And you have the business side that's also making sure there's adequate money to pay for that position. So position control for some school districts is a spreadsheet. For some, it's a part of their financial system. It's all over the place. So we don't necessarily say for FICMAT, as far as fiscal indicators, it doesn't have to be a module of your software. For a district this size, absolutely, but small districts, it could be a spreadsheet. But it's making sure that all of those three legs of the stool are working together to make sure that any time you have a person or a position happening in your district, that it's been authorized, there's enough money, and there's a person in it. I mean, I've seen everything from new positions not going to a board and being authorized. I've seen people being hired without budgets. I've seen 3 people in the same position. So position control, if you don't have a handle on all of those pieces and doing it right, it will get you into a big financial mess. So it's a control.
And my second question relates to going back to job descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
I think I heard y'all say that I think maybe 4 have been done.
That I heard come tonight. You've done more than 4, but I actually at the beginning of the meeting heard 4 come tonight.
Okay. I'm just curious as to, do we know how many still need to be done? I'm just trying to get an idea of like a timeline. Is it like how many years it might take? Because I know it does take a long time. And if there's also a way of prioritizing like certain positions versus others in terms of getting the descriptions done.
It's a multi-layered question, so let me see if I can get to it. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you exactly how many job descriptions need to be revised. I can get that information to you. However, we do have job descriptions, to no one's fault in this room, that go back to the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. And so when we talk about prioritization, it's looking at some of those, just an audit of, okay, how far back do they go? Does that position still exist? We have job descriptions that talk about mimeograph and, smell your purple fingers, We don't use technology in that way in a lot of our job descriptions. So it's looking at what is the need, what then is the position that would describe that, and then as we talked about, the position control piece of that then is either revising the job description, creating a new one, and making sure that there's funding behind that. A quick example of how that sort of plays out, historically in many districts and in this one, that was a paper trail and process that could actually take several weeks to go from a school site saying, you know what, we need another counselor because of the needs of our students. And that's a paper trail and maybe 4 or 5 different pieces of paper and different signatures. We have worked in partnership where we actually now have an online process that we've been beta testing so that is online. It can be created, it's then sent to the next reviewer to ensure that there's budget behind that position, there's a job description behind that, then a number is assigned to that job, then it can be posted so that then people can apply for that. And so that's how sort of a job description actually looks in regards to that. So when we get to all of those job descriptions that we need, it's prioritizing based upon where they are in the at the school sites and at the system. First, we'll look at the years, then we'll look at the need and function, and then we'll schedule from that. And as was also shared, we have been working with an external provider to do that. And our goal, at least on the classified side, is within a year. Within classified and certificated, I would say between 2 and 3. And I'm sort of known for being aggressive in my timelines, and so I'm gonna under-promise and over-deliver on that.
And the other part of that question is, in doing that process, I know it's been mentioned that y'all are working with CSCA. Are the actual employees that do the job reviewing that and saying, yes, this is what I do, no, I don't do that?
Yes, so there are committees both in CSCA, and then we also confer and meet with members of SRTA in that process as well, because the people who actually do the work know what the work needs to be. And so we can then determine what are the functions, what are the responsibilities, what are the roles and outcomes of that position, and that's a part of that process.
Okay. Thank you. I echo Director Fong's comments and praising you for your work and responding to this report, because there was a ton of work to be done. I know that you've been really dedicated to doing it, and lots of praise to Superintendent Dr. Kitamura. And I'm so sorry, Dr. Kitamura. And also your predecessor, Superintendent Shields, who both of you who said we need to take a real hard and honest look at our district, and in lots of ways. And I do remember sitting here, several years ago, where the FICMET people came in and said our IT program was.
That's right. They did do a whole other study. That's right. Yes.
What did they say? It was anarchy. It was IT anarchy. That's what they said. So
we have a very good way with words. Can you tell? No, yeah.
So I appreciate that work, but since there still is stuff in progress or not yet completed, I assume we'll be hearing back again on progress here.
Yes, unless Michelle will
I'm not coming back, but your staff would be happy to report back in a certain amount of time, right?
Yeah, we're so invested in this plan that there's going to be no doubt in my mind that our team will bring this back. Probably in a year. We'll see where we are, what the movement is, to continue to do this. And we'll develop a framework or a guide where this is a regular evaluation of our processes. And then it'll spill over into all our other departments. Because it's just always good to look at how you're doing with the needs of that time, and then improve and look at systems. So it has been, if I knew what I knew when this position came open as superintendent, I don't think I would have taken it, to be very honest with you. It was that frightening once I got into it and saw the complete, I have to say disarray, no disrespect, because it worked at a time, maybe, 20 years ago. But as things began to progress, and as the state and the federal entities require more, and there's just, much more complexity to the work that we do, our systems had to be more streamlined, and we had to know exactly how many positions we had, and position control and business had to connect, and they didn't, folks. Prior, when we came on, they were not a connected entity, and that's scary. Even in my teaching and curriculum instruction background, I knew when I came in and asked for position control, and I really saw a list with pencil scratches. It's scary. It's very scary. So we have come a long, long, long way, but I promise that we will continue to examine what we're doing. Tammy signaled me up there, Tammy Alfonso, that we have 10% of our job descriptions revised for classified, which is a lot compared to where we were 2 years ago. And so it's a commitment on the district's part and CSA's part to continue, keep moving forward with those job descriptions. So, Michelle, thank you so much. I will tell you, Michelle came back at a midterm and said, no, not buying it, don't believe it, no, you're gonna have to go back. And then we got this staff in place, and it came into fruition, it came to play.
It's really been a pleasure. Yeah. It really has. This is not an everyday occurrence for me.
Well, thank you very, very much. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so F6, discussion item, Measure INL roofing projects update.
Get a speaker card, right?
Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Kitamura. Based on a request from President Close, we said we would bring back an update on the roofing and HVAC projects that have taken place over the course of the last couple of summers. To my right is Mike Braff, Director of Facilities, and to my left is Sean Lacrone, member of Beam Professionals, a division of PBK Architects, who has been with us since the inception of our roofing and HVAC program. at that time it was just PBK, came in and helped us with our initial assessments and review of needs throughout our district at all of our school sites, and put together a plan moving forward in terms of roofing and school sites in the worst condition, and ones that we should focus on first. And through that process, we've moved forward over the last couple of summers with 9 completed schools to this point, 2 more that are scheduled to go this summer that have been either approved by the board or the anticipated approval tonight for the Slater project for this summer as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Braff and Mr. Leckrone to go through their presentation to discuss the projects and talk about what transpires at those campuses, and then happy to answer any questions that you may have at the conclusion.
As Rick just touched on, we've completed 9 sites to date. In 2016, there was a roof and HVAC assessment based on the warm, safe, and dry motto that was moving forward in Santa Rosa. At this time, I'm gonna go ahead and turn over the presentation to Mr. Leckrone to go over the details and how the scope was developed and the assessment. And with that said, Sean, go ahead and touch on the sites.
All right, so yeah, like I said, 2016, our goal was to go out and assess every building. We prioritized what we had. We went through work orders. Oh, sorry, not quite close enough, my bad. So we did go out and walk each site, assessed each one of the buildings, went through all the work orders that we had to be able to see where the leaks and the issues that were across the district, and also the HVAC units of the aging that are on there. So there was a long list that we incorporated, and we started prioritizing each one, going down through it, and being able to utilize. So as Rick can see, since in 2017 and 18, we have completed these 9 sites. And I do want to kind of preference that as, it does say completed. What that means is the actual project, the demo, the install of the new roof, all of those have been completed, but the warranty phase is still continuing, because we know with dealing with older buildings, dealing with this size of a scope of work, and the time frame that we do it in is the dry part of the season. So we go out there and we try and do water tests, we try and be able to do different things to replicate the rain, but Mother Nature has its own way of doing things with the wind and the amount of water that comes in that you can't replicate during the summer. So that's why we set up these warranties where we have a 2-year agreement with the HVAC contractor, so any issues that are going through those, and a 5-year warranty with the actual roofing subcontractor to make sure that these leaks and these items that do occur during the wet seasons are rectified and clean. So it's not like we go through the summer, we finish, and then we walk away. No, we're still working with them. We're still maintaining it. Over the last 2 years, we have had approximately 44 warranty adjustments across all 9 of these sites, and we are continuing to make sure that any other ones that might pop up or have additional leaks that are going across these campuses are going out and being rectified right now. We actually went out and did water tests just this last month of ones that were continuing, and making sure that those are now getting corrected as we keep continuing to work with these contractors that have been responding in a very timely manner. So jumping a little more in depth on each one of them.
Can I ask a preliminary question, please? When we, because my understanding is that they're, the whole roofs are gonna be done, so the whole roofs, and then I hear from some folks that what they think they see is instead just sort of patching. Is that, can you address that? Is it really like the whole roof?
So some of the campuses, the whole roofs were done. Some of them, we actually upgraded certain portions. So what we wanted to do is to be able to help take the funding that's available and stretch it to be able to make sure it goes across the entire district. And so we're going out during that evaluation of looking at these roofs, what type of leaks are on there, is there any items that might be unforeseen there that we need to rectify, and you'll see a lot more of that in the high schools. that we found that a lot of these roofs still had life left in them. So what we did is we went out there and actually upgraded the penetrations where you had some of the issues, the drain bowls, to be able to make sure those flashings were in. And then we also took advantage that we were replacing the HVAC units, so we upgraded the flashings that were going around the curbs and those type of items. And then there was some roofs where the surfacings were starting to fail, so we coated, like over at Maria Carrillo, the gymnasium was having some major ones, so we actually coated that, where the other ones it was just the penetration so that we can prolong the life of the actual roof itself. And then looking at that life cycle cost of make sure that, you know, we're not getting hit every 20 years with all your campuses having to be re-roofed. You wanna make sure that you're doing that in certain sequences so that you can continue to be able to progress and move forward on them and not be hit with that big ticket item all at one time. And so that was part of that prioritization of those to be able to then also make that move forward with them. Does that answer your question?
It does, although I guess from the board member who votes on the roofing projects, from what we see, because I look back, I wouldn't know how to distinguish from one that's having its whole roof done and one that's having just part of its roof done, and it looks like Mike wants to answer my question.
So a picture's worth 1,000 words, and as we go through these slides, the buildings designated in red are all new roofs. The colors in blue, as you'll see as we go through campuses, are the repairs or coatings. So as the two slides that are in front of you, Lincoln, as you can see, all the roofs were done. If you go over to Biella, you could see that the majority of the campus was all replaced, and what you see in blue had repairs because, as Sean mentioned, they determined in their assessment that it wasn't necessary for a new roof. And also tying to that is that there's not enough money to go through all the campuses and complete all the roofs and the HVAC that we're doing. The district wouldn't have had the money to continue on with future projects. If that helps you realize or recognize what's been done on each campus. So the color coding should help with, as I said, the red will show all new, blue is coating or repairs.
So yeah, Albert Biella, that one was a site that was, getting to each one of the buildings was fairly easy, but we did do a one-for-one replacement of the HVAC that were out in the center of the buildings, a mechanical well, which did make it a little difficult to get to the units. And the canopies that you see there in blue, and there was one of the main buildings that was re-roofed about 5 or 6 years ago, is why that one wasn't touched during this process. Abe Lincoln, this one is gonna be going on this summer. Every roof on that campus is going to be replaced along with the HVAC units are going to be replaced one for one, so that they will be the same type of units just with a new system. Over at Hidden Valley, there are a few buildings that were not touched. They were either re-roofed with 2 or 3 years prior to this one, or they were in a good enough shape that's gonna be able to prolong the life of it. It was difficult to get to the mechanical wells and to several of these buildings, so that's why some of the square foot price is a little different than you see on the other ones. But we were able to replace all the shingle roofs and the mechanical wells within there, along with the HVAC one for one. James Monroe, we had a higher slope roof that we upgraded to be able to reflash all the penetrations, to be able to let that prolong the life of it. This one was a very flat roof, so we had to add a lot of tapered insulation, so there was raising a lot of the electrical lines, different equipment, everything else to be able to make sure that it properly drained, along with the installation of the one-for-one HVAC units. Herbert Slater, in phase 1, the locker rooms were leaking, and so we wanted to make sure that we went and took care of those in the first year during the implementation of this plan. So we were able to accomplish that. knowing that we were going to have to come back for phase 2 because we're actually switching over the system from what's called a 2-pipe system over to a new rooftop gas-powered units. And so that did require DSA. We went in for the plans. When we finally got it out of DSA, we rebid it this year, and that is actually going to be the next agenda item to be able to try and move forward on, as you can see what we're performing on that. Hilliard Comstock, this one also had some low slope roofs, so we did add taper, we did raise some items, and the HVAC units were replaced 1 for 1, just with newer units that were going on there. Now you can see a lot of the blue that went across the LC Allen and Maria Carrillo. A lot of these roofs, we had some chronic leaks that were going around, especially the gymnasium areas where the locker rooms were, a lot of the rise walls that were going in those areas, along with the theater. So those roofs were replaced. The rest of them, we did go in there and upgrade the penetrations. We did coat a couple of the roofs and went out and to be able to increase the life expectancies of this campus. Pioneer High School, this one was done in the first year of the implementation. We did go out to where the chronic leaks were to be able to help get those watertight, so we did replace the 2-story main classroom wing along with the shops building and the gymnasium, and the HVAC units were only replaced on those buildings at this campus in the initial phase of it. Santa Rosa High School Phase 1, we have been able to upgrade the HVAC system from an old DX type of a unit to a VRF, more energy efficient HVAC equipment that's on there, along with replacing the underlayment of below the clay tile roof, and all new roof system was installed across the main lower slope roofs. And that's everything that we've had so far. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
I have 2 blue cards. Oh, I have 3 blue cards. Oh no, I have 2 blue cards. So, Angelica Salas.
Hi, my name is Angelica Salas, and I'm a Spanish teacher at LC Allen High School. Last summer, I was planning on organizing and lesson planning during summer, as usual. I'm a new teacher, so I need a lot of planning, and I wanted to organize my classroom. Unfortunately, I was not allowed to because there was going to be roofing construction, and it was unsafe. So I waited, and of course, I planned lessons at home, as usual. However, this semester, after the intense rains, a water leak appeared in my classroom. It makes me nervous every day I see it, especially now that we have a lot of rain. I'm afraid it will leak on top of one of my students. I sent like multiple emails, but nothing has changed yet. But more than nervous, it makes me sad. First, because I'm not the only one with this issue. I saw an email that the union sent, SRTA sent, of a picture of another classroom ceiling with leaks after the roofing upgrades and maintenance in our schools. And second, because water leaks is something we shouldn't have to worry about. And third, because our 165 student load is more than enough in our plate, and a drop of water falling on top of a student out of a 36 freshman class is something we shouldn't worry about. And lastly, because quality of education matters. And yeah, this is not representing quality right now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Margie Brady-Long.
Thank you, Margie Brady-Long. I'm from Carrillo High School. I had 2 questions that I missed if they were addressed in your explanation. One was how the drainage systems are, if they're being handled at all in this process of going around. And secondly, what the plan is to deal with skylights. When you did your assessment, at what point do we need to change the flashing or whatever on the skylights, and how are we going to take care of that? Thank you.
So the drainage systems, to be able to respond to that, we are evaluating the different ones. We're making sure, especially at different schools, that we're adding either taper to be able to make sure water is getting to the drain bowls themselves. During the summer, we actually do clean out the drain bowls, and we do what we call a flush test. So again, you can't replicate Mother Nature, so you can try and take as many buckets of water, go down the drains, make sure that it's flowing freely, to be able to make sure that it's at least getting down into the sight lines below slab, basically from where it moves from there. As far as the skylights go, we are replacing the flashing, of the curb flashings that are going around the actual skylights as we replace the different roofs, and the ones that we are seeing chronic leaks, we are addressing as we go there on the upgrades. At Slater, we do have other skylights that are glass that we are replacing overall to make sure that they're meeting code compliance.
Thanks for addressing that. Do I have questions, comments? Yes, Director Manieri?
You mentioned in your presentation that you replaced the roof at LC Allen's Theater, but I'm looking at the map and that's blue.
That was Maria Carrillo's theater.
Maria Carrillo's Theater, okay. And then kind of just to talk about LC, just because I have a lot of students that contact me about the roofing issues and the leaking and all of that. Is there a process by which you reevaluate what you've done and see, you know, is there more work that we need to do? And is there an additional cost to the district for doing that work? I know you mentioned a warranty.
So the initial assessment that was done in 2016 helped set up the priority, and then each time as we move forward to selecting the job, we actually go back out and do a more thorough investigation, because in 2016 it was kind of that 30,000 foot view to be able to see the overall entire district, and then once we make the selections of the individual campuses from that process, we'll go out and actually do cores. We'll go out and evaluate each one of them. A good example is actually Abe Lincoln. During our initial assessment, the roof panels of the standing seam metal roof looked like they were in decent shape, but once we went out for that analysis for the actual scope of work, we found that a lot of them were not attached and they were starting to show evidence of slippage. So that's why those ones are also being replaced during the summer.
So the timeline is the summer, so this is specific to that, what you just mentioned. So what's the timeline for current issues that are coming up? And again, like what is the cost of that?
So current issues of leaks from the projects we've completed, we actually, as soon as we hear about the leak, we send out the warranty adjustment directly to the contractors. They will come out. The agreement that they have is within 48 hours to be able to try and do that. A lot of times it's still raining, so they will try and do a temporary seal. And then what we want to do is we make sure that they're doing a repair that's permanent. What we don't want them to do is go up there, as I always joke, put a piece of bubble gum that keeps it from leaking for a year, and then it washes away and has to come back. So we're working with them to make sure that a permanent repair of whatever that leak comes up is performed so that it will last the 20-year life expectancy of the roof too.
And my last question, I promise. How does someone request that? Does it have to go through the district? Can like a teacher request for someone to take a look and then to initiate that 48-hour process? What does that look like?
So we've set up a process with the site administration, and the site administrators has designated, usually it's the custodial staff, or it will be the principal themselves that will send. Once a project's completed, let me back up. When a project is completed, it gets turned over to maintenance. So that goes through the work order process. Maintenance will then contact the contractor. The architect, who will contact the contractor. Until it is turned over to maintenance, these requests come to myself, who forward them to the architect, and I work with the site to make sure that it's corrected in a timely manner. So to directly answer your question, site administration, whoever's been designated, either contacts myself or maintenance, who gets in contact with the architect who sends out the directive to the contractor. So there's documentation, so we can document where it was, what it was, and the time that it took to complete and what the fix is, because they might have to make a recommendation, just not take it upon the contractor to fix.
Director Medina and then Director McCormick.
Yeah, I think just from like over the brief period that I've served on the board, and like as the rains come, like I've heard a lot of like issues around leaks. You know, we've definitely had a lot of rain this year. And I think somewhere along the line, something's just not working well, not working fast enough. Whether it be the time from when something's reported to whether it be the custodians or the principals or whoever, and the time that it gets reported to y'all, where there's that 48-hour period. It seems like it's taking quite longer than it should, you know, affecting classroom situations, you know, affecting the quality of education that we're having for our students. We shouldn't have an environment where they have a leaky classroom or a leaky facility. I think, you know, it undermines the expectations of the taxpayers when passing a bond. So I think that we really need to focus on doing a better job at that. And so whatever we got to do to identify what the issues are that are causing it to take a long time, because I hear, you know, it sounds like it works well, but the feedback that I hear from the community is that it's not really actually working. So I think we really need to do something to make it work faster. The other question that I had was in relation to the gutters and drainage. I know that was brought up, but in previous contracts, is that part in previous projects? Is that something that has been done? Have any like gutters been like replaced, or is that just not part of the contract? Is that something that needs to be done? Or is that something that will be done in the future? Because it sounds like that's also been an issue.
So on some of the campuses, yes, some of the gutters have been replaced. Other ones where we did not touch the standing seam metal roof at like Elsie Allen, it was not replaced at the time. We were looking at the warm, safe, dry policy. In hindsight, that should have been something that was, and we were working on getting that addressed too.
Do you know like a timeline for that, or?
Are you speaking of Elsie Allen specifically? Yeah, they're right now they're looking at quotes to see how much it would cost to replace some of the gutters that weren't on the roofing structures that were touched by the roofing project. Breezeways and archways and some of those areas that did not require roofing upgrades or replacement.
And in the, I don't know if it was in the bids, in the prior bids, was that something that was specifically addressed, or is it something that needs to be addressed in future bids?
It was not addressed in the original Elsie Allen bid, but in future bids, we are making sure those are being incorporated.
Thank you.
Director McCormick.
As you said, we need to make sure that not all of the roofing projects happen at the same time in the future. So do we have a system in place, or are we establishing a system of some sort of rotation of assessment and replacement so it doesn't all hit at the same time again in the future?
So the projects that we completed didn't happen all at the same time. It happened over a couple of summers starting in summer of 16. So we've had 3 summers where there's been roofing that has taken place, 16, 17, 18, and we're moving forward with the next one for part of our 19 roofing package. We know realistically that somewhere between 3 and maybe 5 schools are what we can accommodate, and also get bidders in the area that can also accommodate that work over the summer. We are in a competitive market, not only in Sonoma County, but with other schools that are going through bond programs, and companies have a lot of work right now. So realistically, it's not going to be more than that. We're not looking to do 15 schools to complete it this summer. Right now we're at 2. There are a couple of other schools that we're trying to move forward, but we're at DSA with those schools and having to address other items that have come up that are prolonging their stay at the Division of State Architects. So realistically, we're at that, I would say the place we want to be is at that 3 to 5 schools a summer, and then move this through, so in 3 to 4 years we would be nearing the end of roofing and HVAC throughout the district.
Omar Medina.
I'm sorry. I'm just going back to the issue of the reporting of something and having it be addressed. You know, I heard like at some places it might be the custodian, some places it might be the principal. Do we not have a set consistent procedure that is the same throughout all sites, or does each site decide how it will be done?
Each site, we meet when we turn over the project. Let me back up, before we turn it over to maintenance. And yes, we have, right or wrong, left it up to the site administration to determine who is going to be that point of contact for the site. So we can reevaluate whether, I guess, the facilities or business services office makes that decision for them, but we've to date left that up to the site administration, feeling they know their campus the best and who would be the best point of contact to reach out to us. So we don't make that decision for them. Maybe we need to take another look at that. But once again, we've left that up to the site administration, feeling that they know their staff better than us to figure out who is going to be, once again, that point of contact to reach out to us.
So I'm going to address that. The elementary and middle school principals, it would be them. They're the point of contact. At the high school level, many times it's an assistant principal that's in charge of facilities, and so they're the point of contact. I think that we can definitely recheck systems if making sure at the schools with multiple administrators who the point of contact is, but the bottom line, it all gets reported. If the staff member or whoever is affected reports it to the administration into our online system for them to take a look at it. Now, I'm gonna say that we are, as in many of our district office positions, our maintenance and operations folks have not recovered from the cuts that happened back in, I guess it was the 70s, I don't know, whenever, maybe 2008, maybe the Great Recession. So we are sorely, 70s, 2008, whatever. Yeah, my doctorate's not in math, so yeah. They are worn thin. They're running thin in what they're gonna do, and we're gonna have to take a look at that. I will say that when I talked to principals about, did you hear about this leak? And many times they have not heard a report. So we're gonna have to dig into that. Why are we not hearing about that? The second thing is, we are in this bond, and thank you, community, for passing this bond in 2015? 14. Are trying to do 35 years of work in the last 2 years. Really, our projects have started in the last 2 years. I'm not trying to make excuses. What I'm saying is that the level and intensity of what our architects are finding when they uncover those roofs is really puts us in a difficult situation. And so what I think Sean is learning is that don't make assumptions about what you see on the outside, and we're gonna have to dig deeper to ensure that we are preparing bids accordingly. And what that means is that the money for the bonds is gonna run out sooner. That's the bottom line. So we have to be aware of that. There was one more point I was gonna make on the flashings of the gutters. It'll come back to me. But I do want to say that just like all of our other teams, it isn't that this team is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's almost an impossible feat to take the age and wear of our roofs and HVAC systems and try to make everybody happy. It's difficult when teachers and staff and students are cold, when they're hot with our HVAC systems, when leaks, and Sean, I want to ask, is it normal for either replace the blue roofs, no, the red roofs, or the repair for there to be leaks?
I wish I could be able to tell you that's not normal, but it is in the industry.
I want you to tell me the truth.
The
is
truth
it normal or is it not normal?
Yep, it is normal, because when you're replacing a roof, you're doing it on site, especially in dry weather. And again, I can throw as much water as I want into a detail, but once you start throwing wind and Mother Nature and everything else that comes with that rain, you can't replicate that during the summer.
So do other school districts, organizations that you're working with who are replacing roofs like we are working with, once your work is completed, are they finding that there are some areas that leak?
Yes.
Okay, so I've asked it two different ways to try to make sure that this is not an abnormality of what we're finding in Santa Rosa City Schools, and it isn't that someone is doing something wrong. Is that right? Is that correct?
Correct.
Am I hitting it on the head? Okay.
And if I could finish where I was going. Dr. Kitamura started talking. So I think in terms of the systems, you know, there's the elementaries and the high schools, how it's done. But I think what you said, Dr. Kitamura, is that there's some sort of digital system that this information goes into. And so I think part of the evaluation is, are we using that digital system most effectively to address these issues?
Yeah, in fact, I contacted, as we were speaking and listening, I contacted principal and say, I need you to look up in the log, were these leaks reported? And what was the closeout or not closeout on them? So we can honestly address it. Did someone drop the ball, or was it reported and taken care of?
Cool. And I think it's just, it's really important that, you know, we all push each other to make our systems work most effectively, because we're doing it for our youth. And so if I come off too hard, I'm sorry, but I think it's important.
I will say that as a board member, I think that I am 6 years, cumulatively, I hear more about leaks than anything else. And so it, you know, and so even though but the leaks, it just is, it's constant. So I appreciate you bringing the report forward. I have one question. There were a lot of deductive change orders, and I guess those are saving us money, but some of them are really big compared to the bid price, and I just kind of wanted a little bit of explanation on that.
So during the evaluation, we felt there was a lot of unforeseen items that were underneath the decks. We were afraid of different dry rots, different items that were on there, so we wanted to make sure that when we opened it up, we could officially cover it back up during the summer. Once we opened certain items that actually, surprisingly, in a good nature, it wasn't dry rotted out, so it didn't take as much to actually fix those items to allow us to go ahead and replace it back in.
Okay. So I hear that this is a huge job, and as a board member who hears about leaks as much as about anything else, you know, what would be helpful for me is to have these kind of explanations ahead of time, because then I could answer someone's questions, and if they could be sort of public to say, listen, this is an imperfect process, it's an ongoing issue, where we're, you know, like we get these contracts to approve, and it's to replace the roof. And then so it is news to me tonight that we have not replaced the whole roof. Or, you know, and so, and if we don't need to replace the whole roof, then we certainly shouldn't do it, because that just costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time. But, you know, and if it's not you replace the roof and you're done for 15 years, but it's this ongoing process, then we just really need to understand that, because otherwise we have no way to deal with all these comments, which are really, you know, we hear about them more than anything else. And Dr. Kitamura, you are correct. Lots of times people haven't gone straight to their principal, which is a problem in the reporting system. And so that is something that we need to make sure that we change. But it would help, I think, the board members just to be better educated on the process, and to also know, like, okay, here's the bid, we're replacing 80% of the roof, it's gonna be this much, so that we can deal with comments and questions from the public in the future.
Can I ask one more question?
Omar Medina. One more question.
As a curiosity came up that, you know, I'm imagining leaks, and I'm wondering if when there's leaks as part of the repair procedure or whatever, is there any at any point where there's like some sort of test, like if molds build up, does that ever happen, or is that part of a standard procedure or under certain situations?
So if there's been substantial leaks, for instance, there was some leaks at Santa Rosa this year, and there was concern whether there was mold. The design team and the facilities department, even along with maintenance, we will take preventative measures to make sure that there isn't mold. So we will make sure we do test if we feel there was enough water that came in. We will test to make sure, but we don't usually that's doesn't occur that often. But there has been some instances that we did have to test, and it did come back negative. We've never had any positive results.
Okay, if Director Medina has no more questions, I think we'll move on to the next agenda item. Hey, kid. F7, thank you for your award. An action item award bid for Herbert Slater Middle School HVAC roofing project.
Yeah, so this was the item that Sean discussed in the previous board presentation. We're bringing this for approval. We would have normally put this on consent, but with the presentation tonight, we felt it was appropriate to present the roofing and HVAC update and then present this to the board for approval.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments, or is there a motion?
Move for approval of item F7, award bid for Herbert Slater Middle School HVAC roofing project.
I second.
Moved by Director Sheffield, second by Director Manieri. Roll call vote, please.
Director Manieri, I'm sorry, excuse me. Director Sheffield? Director Manieri?
Aye.
Director Fong?
Aye.
Director McCormick?
Aye.
Director Medina?
Aye.
President Close?
Aye.
Director Macon?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Bringing us to F8, discussion item on the parcel tax update and timeline.
Good evening again. Joining me tonight is Charles Heath from TBWB, who is our parcel tax consultant, to give us an update on a proposed timeline and some options for parcel tax. With that, I will turn it over to Charles.
Good evening. I'm Charles Heath. I'm a partner with TBWB Strategies. We served as your consultants on the bond measures that you were just discussing, and for about the last year, we've also been advising the district on potential strategies for a parcel tax measure. So given that some of those discussions occurred before the current board was seated, I thought we would start with a little review of the history and some of the work that we did last year in looking at a parcel tax before we turn our sights ahead to the opportunities that may lie before us. So, you know, parcel taxes are one of the few opportunities that school districts have to generate locally controlled funding that you control, not dictated by the state. You basically put a proposal before your local voters, ask them to tax themselves in order to provide supplemental funding to the school district to support whatever programs and services that you choose to benefit from the programs in how you write the measure. Parcel taxes are quite common throughout the Bay Area. Many high-performing school districts and others around the Bay Area have them. Most of the districts in Marin, several here in Sonoma County. We've worked with Petaluma and Cotati-Roanoke Park and a number of other districts here to pass parcel taxes in recent years. Santa Rosa hasn't had one, so this is a new proposal that we're looking at to address the specific funding needs of the district here. So in the summer of 2018, we conducted some public opinion polling here in the community among voters likely to vote in several upcoming elections in order to test the potential viability of a parcel tax. And the way that works is we use tried and true opinion research strategies to get to develop a statistically reliable understanding of how voters feel about the issue. That's done through sampling of voters who are likely to vote in upcoming elections based on their past voter history, which is a public record. And then we ask questions regarding the type of potential measure that might be on the ballot, different tax rates that voters might be asked to consider, different program priorities that a measure might fund. We also offer information, both pro and con, that sort of simulates a campaign environment in which a measure might be subjected to in order to understand how that all shakes out in overall support. And so when we conducted that polling in the summer of last year, and the timing of that was because one of the options the district was considering was a potential November 2018 parcel tax measure, which ultimately the board decided not to pursue. We found generally strong support for a potential parcel tax measure. So the challenge with parcel taxes is they require a 2/3 vote, right? One of the highest thresholds in electoral politics generally. But what we found, and we were looking at two measures, one that would benefit your high school district, one that would benefit your elementary school district, of course, with the elementary district overlapping, so those taxpayers would ultimately pay both measures. We found strong support, pretty consistently above the 2/3 mark. And the numbers that are summarized here show how support changed between different potential election environments. So the likely special election, that's in a low turnout election where you might put a parcel tax on the ballot in a non-regularly scheduled election, generally low voter turnout, and we saw support there in the high school area of about 66% and the elementary area about 70%. You also have the option to place a parcel tax measure on an all mail-in ballot election, and there are several established election dates throughout the year when you can do that. Support in our estimation of what voter turnout would look like in a mail ballot election environment was very similar, about 68% in the high school district and also about 68-69% in the elementary district. We also took a look at the opportunity in March 2020, and support there was again 68-69%. So one of the encouraging things we're seeing here is, one, support starting above the 2/3 mark before we've even started to communicate with the community about a parcel tax and what it would fund and what the needs are, but also seeing consistency among, as voter turnout ebbs and flows with these different types of elections, support doesn't change a whole lot, and that's fairly uncommon in my experience. Usually we see pretty significant changes in support, up to plus or minus 10 percentage points as you look at different types of an election. So both those diehard voters that turn out in all types of elections and those voters that only turn out in the big, exciting, enticing elections, there seems to be consistency in support for your measures. The good news there is that it provides some flexibility in terms of our options for when we might place a measure on the ballot. So now looking ahead to the options for when we might place a parcel tax measure on the ballot in the future, there's a few different options. One, California has moved its presidential primary election from the normal June date to earlier in March in 2020. So this will have a significant impact because usually by the time the primary rolls around to California in June, the nominating process nationally is all wrapped up, so it's kind of a lackluster election. That's not going to be the case in 2020. California is going to be very much in play. We anticipate this to be a very interesting election that will draw a high voter turnout. Generally, higher voter turnout is a good thing for parcel tax proposals because those extra voters that turn out are younger, more likely to have school-age children, generally of a more progressive ideology. So friendly to taxes. So that's one option that we're taking a serious look at. I mentioned the mail ballot election opportunity. You would have an opportunity to do that in May of 2020. And then there's also, of course, the general election that will occur in November of 2020. One important factor here to look at, which is represented visually here by the line, is that when we cross over from the March and May opportunities to the November 2020 opportunity, you miss the deadline to get the tax on the subsequent year's tax rolls. So then you would be looking at not receiving funding in the next year, 2020, 2021 school year. You'd have to wait till 2021, 2022. So full year of delay in terms of when you receive the funds, schools start benefiting, et cetera. So because of those factors in that analysis, sorry, I got ahead of myself. So one of the factors that we want to look at as we think about a measure going forward is sort of the fundamental structure of the measure that we might consider. So the traditional approach that most school districts have used is a normal flat parcel tax where all parcels of land within the district are taxed the same amount. So $100 per parcel, for example, that would be applied to all taxable parcels in the district, whether that be a large commercial or industrial property or a small residential single-family home. That's how most school districts have structured their parcel taxes. That is, in fact, the type of structure that we utilized when we looked at our polling last year. In fact, we tested a $50 parcel tax in the high school district and a $75 per parcel tax in the elementary school district. So again, those taxpayers in the elementary area that overlap in the two districts would be asked to pay $125 per year. There are some school districts in California that have moved to a square foot rate tax structure. The idea there is that you have a rate that is cents per square foot. Oftentimes that rate might be a nickel a square foot, 5 cents, 10 cents per square foot. Los Angeles Unified School District just put a 16% square foot tax on the ballot that's on the June 4th ballot. So that's another option, and there was actually a recent court case that suggests that the square footage model does conform with the requirement, the state law requirement that parcel taxes be applied uniformly across all parcels. So we have additional reason to think that this is a valid and viable structure. The upside of the flat rate tax and why school districts have done it for so many years is because it's simple. You can tell everyone exactly what it's going to cost them. There's no math. Whereas the square footage rate option, everyone pays a different amount, right? So it can be a little more complicated to convey, and generally complication and confusion in ballot measures results in decreased levels of support. So something we would want to look at in polling, but I wanted to share the option with you as something to think about as we move forward.
Can I interrupt with a question, please?
Sure.
On the square footage, so my understanding of the square footage is that, well, it's advantageous in some ways, not regressive, et cetera, but that improvements is very broadly defined. And so my understanding is like the reason we didn't go out for a county housing bond was that the ag community said no, because any part of their land that is planted, which could be, you know, high yield crops, it could be lettuce, any part is considered an improvement. And so it would have been, you know, just financially prohibitive. They couldn't have afforded it for some people. And we do have, like in the greater high school district, it includes a lot of our unincorporated area. It does include some ag property. And so that concerns me. So I'm wondering if am I correct on the definition of improvements? And if so, if we can figure out a way, or if there's some way to figure out how, you know, who's going to be affected by this, by that definition in a really troubling way.
Yeah, I'm certainly no expert on what constitutes an improvement on agricultural property. I mean, my understanding generally and how I've seen this applied in other school districts is, you know, building square footage, so structures that are on a property. I do know that in some counties where we've looked at this option, we found that there are some real inconsistencies in the data and, you know, outdated information on the county assessor's rolls just about, you know, what exists on properties, because obviously that changes over time with development and whatnot. So that's definitely an issue that we can analyze further and dig more deeply on, and specifically look at, you know, what are the estimated impacts on ag properties to see if the issue raised is a real one here.
Thanks.
Okay. So looking ahead, as I mentioned, we think March 2020 offers a good opportunity for looking at a parcel tax, and there are going to be some deadlines coming up that we need to keep in mind if we do want to stay on a track to potentially put a measure on the ballot. The timeline here represents the steps that we typically go through in testing the viability of a measure and preparing a measure for the ballot. The feasibility study is partially completed at this point because we have done the survey research that was conducted last summer. We think that there's some additional work to do in terms of engaging both internal stakeholders within the district, be that parent leaders, teacher leaders, staff leaders, principals, and others at the secondary and elementary level in your district to sort of talk through a parcel tax and make sure we have good internal buy-in on what this proposal might look like, and then also do some external consensus building in the community. That probably will include talking to business leaders, ag leaders, et cetera, so that we can get feedback on these potential tax structures and use that input to refine our proposal. With that, we would recommend doing some updated opinion research, probably in late summer, right around the time school is coming back into session, because at that point it will be over a year since we've last checked in with voters, and as time passes, opinions change. So it would be good to get a fresh look on where people are at on this issue. And then we would use that to bring forward some recommendations in advance of the deadline to place a measure on that March ballot. So state law says that the board must adopt a resolution calling for the election at least 88 days prior to the election day. That ends up being in early December of 2019. Practically, we would probably be looking at a board meeting prior to Thanksgiving to actually make this decision. So that's why we would want to be doing this consensus building in the coming months, make sure the community is aware of this. They've had some opportunity to provide feedback. We've updated our opinion research and brought recommendations to you in order to make a decision prior to those deadlines for the March election. And that if the board does vote to call for a March election, the last phase of the process is an advocacy campaign. So by law, school district resources, including district time, money, staff member involvement, cannot be used to advocate for or against a ballot measure. So for that final phase, like we did for Measures INL, an independent campaign committee has to form, private resources have to be raised to go out and mount a vote yes campaign, essentially, to make sure that you reach that difficult 2/3 threshold. And for tough supermajority tax measures, typically a fairly aggressive campaign is required in order to be successful. So that's another piece we want to look at to make sure that is ready to be in place if we were to trigger this election. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Director Medina.
I believe I previously heard mentioned that the state might go to a 55% threshold. Do we have any information on that, the actual likelihood in relation to these timelines, if likely at all?
Sure. So the 2/3 requirement for tax measures is in the California Constitution. So there has been a constitutional amendment introduced in the legislature that would reduce the threshold for parcel taxes to 55%, like was done for bond measures about 2 decades ago. I have to say that I've been working on this type of measure for about 20 years now, and I've seen that same legislation introduced probably 10 to 15 times, and it's never gotten out of the legislature because it requires a 2/3 vote of the legislature. 2/3 Democratic majorities right now, so it's not impossible to imagine. But after it gets out of the legislature, it has to go to the statewide ballot. Earliest that could happen is November 2020, so it's not going to happen on any of the timelines we're looking at, but maybe in the future.
Other questions? Director Sheffield and Director Fong.
I'm just wondering, has there been thought given to the cost per election if we're going to do a special election versus, the primary versus and the difference between, what the overall cost is and the impact there?
Yeah, we've received estimates from Sonoma County to look at the differential in cost. I'm sorry, I don't have those numbers in front of me at the moment, but I can get them to you. Basically, the cost that the district pays for an election is based on the number of other issues on the same ballot. So the more other agencies you're sharing the ballot with, the more those costs.
Jurisdiction cost sharing.
Yeah, they share them, and so the cost to you becomes less. I think that's one of the reasons why the statewide primary in March of 2020 is an attractive option, because there will be a lot of other stuff on that ballot that will help defray the cost to you. That would be true in March and November of 2020. Any of the other special election options would be more expensive.
But other options are available, the mail-in ballot, usually half of what the cost is, or typically half of what the cost is for a special election.
Yeah, if you weren't looking at either the primary or general election, I would then suggest that you look at a mail ballot election, because that is less expensive and there's some built-in advantages to just having everyone vote by mail.
Just things for us to consider. Thank you.
Yep.
Director Fong.
Thank you. When would we have to know about making decision about flat rate versus square foot rate?
Well, I think we're going to need more information. It sounds like we're going to depend on Charles to research a little, maybe along with our attorney, to get definition on what it means to be a building improvement. So once we have that, and we'll need to we need to do that fairly quickly, because we need to get moving on whether or not we're going to go, and that means you guys have to make a decision because we have to get a resolution, all those kinds of things. So we will start digging for that information. What other information does the board need to help make a decision? Would be something I would ask the board.
Director Medina.
I don't know if that was a question or not, but I was going to answer it. I think this process started before I was on the board, so to me, it's the clear why is the money, right? But I think for me, because in general, like, I don't necessarily like more taxes. I don't own property, so it's not an issue for me. But just in theory, but I really am more, for me to decide, I want to know the why. What is it that we're doing this for? What specifically are we going to use it for? And when we have that discussion, it's kind of more of what I'm interested in, where it falls on the timeline.
So I think that when we come back with that other information, and you have to remind me, did we provide the new board members with the polling results? Okay, so we'll get those out to the new board members. We'll give it out to everybody again, just as a reminder. So we did a polling, as Charles said, in July of 2018, and what it provided was information about what our community thinks would be a priority for parcel tax. So I think that would help a lot in you seeing what rose to the top.
As far as the priorities?
As far as what the community said were priorities for the use of the parcel tax.
I mean, I can tell you in real sort of summary terms, some of the top priorities that came out of the polling were investments in academic programs, especially in the areas of STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, preserving music, art instruction, attracting and retaining excellent teachers, ensuring school libraries stay open and available for students, and preparing students for college and careers. Now, we have to sort of test things at that general level in the polling, because these aren't education experts that we're talking to, they're sort of average voters. So, then generally the process is to kind of blend these themes and priorities with your budget needs to come up with a proposal that meets both the community's priorities, but the district's priorities as well.
I would say from the district's priorities, STEM is really a huge priority for us. Not that the other four are not, but I think it's a very large priority. And depending on if it's a possibility to do the flat or the square foot, the amount of money that's generated is different. So then that would also affect the priorities, the planning. So, sure. So we'll get the polling results out to you. And then the next meeting with the definitions that people are asking for, we can maybe start looking towards a decision one way or the other.
Maybe some assessment of what the price for various elections might be as well.
Yeah, we'll bring that back.
I'm going to call on Director Fong because of her hand raising. It's excellently modeled. Director Fong.
So we've been talking this since I've been on the board, 2.5 years now, and I don't want us to be rushing at the end, so I'd like to bring this back as soon as possible because we are going to want to engage community support, staff, teachers, feedback, everybody at the table as we move forward or decide to move forward.
Director Medina.
Yeah, I think, well, first, in terms of the research, I don't know if it's done, but have we looked at past measures, and have any of them failed in relation to this district? Have we looked at the historical data on that?
I'm familiar with the bond measures, but I don't know of a parcel tax proposal that's been
we
attempted.
haven't had a parcel tax before.
Well, I mean, just bond measures in general.
Oh,
for
I don't know.
Yeah, I have that data, and I can share that as part of our next update.
And again, I don't necessarily see dates. I think you mentioned the 88 days prior to the election, but I think for me, there's the build, the advocacy campaign, just really building on that. I think I'd really want to, if we go forward with this, really have more time rather than less in terms of building that. So I think moving on, making a decision on this would be really important. And I think in deciding what the district's priorities, I think really including like all the stakeholders, I think would definitely be important to just kind of get an idea of where everybody's at and increase that support through buy-in by people being involved in that process.
Yeah, do you want to describe the polling and how you, the process of that in terms of the way it was gathered from stakeholders?
I'm sorry, the
polling
of voters, or
the polling for us in July 2018.
Right.
In order to get the themes or the important things that came up.
Sure. Well, we developed a questionnaire based on input from the district to understand, if additional dollars were available, how would those dollars likely be used? And, it was a broad list of potential uses. And then we also put together some sort of mocked up potential parcel tax proposals, the same kind of language that voters would read on the ballot if they were going to a polling booth. And then we drew a sample of voters that were likely to vote in the different elections that I shared earlier. And then we basically conducted that survey among them, either by telephone or a web survey, where they were invited either by text message or by email. And we're very careful to control the voters that were interviewed so that their demographics directly reflected those likely to vote in an election. So typically that kind of statistical research is how we understand the broader voter opinion, but then there's also the individual conversations with, teachers, staff, parent leaders, all the key stakeholders within the district to get their opinions as well. And, through those different data inputs is how we develop something that hopefully has broad consensus.
Okay, I think we all agree that we need to move forward quickly in terms of making a decision so that we have our, time to actually build a campaign and if we're going to do this. With respect to the square footage thing, it sounds to me like this is if this was addressed in case law, that this is an interpretation of, of equitable application, of equal application among parcels, which actually seems to me that means we could write our own definition so long as it affects everybody equally. Meaning it could be footprint, it could be because the question is is it footprint or is it total square footage of a building? Does it include parking lots? Does it include X, Y, and Z? Does it include everything planted? But if in fact are all parcels treated equally, well then why can't we have our own definition that is applied equally among the parcels? And so this seems like that really F3 should be involved in answering this question, because if so, we might be able to narrowly tailor this.
So will that, as a question, we will take that one as well. And so Rick, you have all the questions the board is asking for our next board meeting? Okay.
Thank you. Director Medina. I'm just going to...
Well, what you just said kind of added a little bit of confusion, but maybe a question to me. So it sounded like you were saying that the square footage thing is something that's kind of new based on case law that we could describe, and if so, then I'm wondering, is it that square footage we could define it as to whether it be square footage based on structures, as was mentioned, or we could define it by lot size?
That's a question that I'm asking, because I think it's unclear, and so I think that's a legal opinion. I don't know the answer to it, but that's a possibility. I do not know. That is the question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon. And that brings us to F9.
Good evening again. Tonight we're bringing forward the resolution for alignment with the City of Santa Rosa's reduction in developer fees for an area of downtown Santa Rosa to incentivize residential development. What this would do is for buildings that are brought in mixed use, including retail and residential housing. For those buildings at 4 stories or above, we would, reduce our developer fees that that project would have to pay to the school district. If the building was 3 stories or below, they would pay the same developer fees that they would be required to do so now. In order, like I said, to incentivize building downtown. This is in alignment with the City of Santa Rosa's reduction in some of their fees, and it would expire at the 5-year mark at the same point in time that the city's does. And at that time, as the city will do, it would be reevaluated to see if it should continue or not at that point. On the map above, you can see the proximity of the area that they are looking, that the city has already adopted for, and I believe it's within about a half mile of the SMART station and the Transit Mall in the downtown area to make transportation easier and hopefully bring in new development. As was pointed out at the previous meeting when the city was here, right now in this area, we're generally collecting $0 from developer fees. So it's not an issue of losing a lot of money or the potential to lose a lot of money. It may actually gain money for the development of the first 3 stories, hopefully with additional stories for residential units that we'd also want to look at as part of taking a look at workforce housing and other initiatives that we want to be part of as a school, as part of the school district.
Thank you. I have a blue card, Peter Rumble.
Should all the presentations be that quick? Thank you. Good evening, Peter Rumble, Santa Rosa Metro Chamber. Really appreciate your board's movement in this direction. One of my favorite quotes from our local elected officials is David Rabbit. It's time to treat the housing crisis like an actual crisis. With the loss of the housing bond, that's $124 million locally, plus about 7 times that not going to affordable housing anymore, despite whatever political argument there is around that. It's money we don't have anymore. And so it's really all hands on deck. The chamber has organized the major employers of the region to come together to start directly participating in housing projects. We are on the precipice of launching a housing trust funded again by the private sector to invest in affordable housing. So it is all hands on deck. I strongly resonate with the comment of collecting 100% of $0 currently, with the potential of having per pupil funding if we encourage more families to stay, and I want to emphasize stay, in our community. There was an article today or yesterday in the Press Democrat about super commuters. We know that 50,000 people or so are commuting every day out of the area to their place of employment out of the county, and another 20,000 or so commuting in county because they can't afford to live here. So imagine if we can capture all of those families and keep their kids here in our schools, how much stronger our school system would be. Carrying on from your previous item, we would be happy to talk early related to a parcel tax to make sure that we can find some kind of common ground in funding for schools and not diverted to other purposes. And it's going to be a hard lift, but we can try to get there, just like we're trying to get there on this issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was worth the wait.
It's worth the wait if you say yes.
Okay. So are there any questions or comments? Director Sheffield.
Just some discussion, and thank you, Peter, for sticking around. Really do appreciate the momentum and support behind you and the Chamber bring to this. And there's so much going on in Santa Rosa around rebuild and residential development, and it seems like, you know, every week I'm in one meeting or another, and just I think this is a great opportunity for us to be with the community on something that is just so much bigger than schools or so much bigger than the business industry, and really an opportunity for us to shape the future of the community that we live in. I support this idea, and I can't wait for us to vote on it.
Director Fong.
Just echoing Director Sheffield, we want to be one of the all hands on deck. Absolutely.
Anyone else? Well, I would like to move this item then, because I can do that. And this is something that I've been pushing and I'm really excited about. So I'm going to move approval of the resolution establishing a temporary residential housing project incentive program to increase high-density development and affordable housing in downtown Santa Rosa by decreasing developer fees for eligible projects.
And that's how you make a motion. I would second that motion.
Okay. Moved by Director Close, seconded by Director Fong. Roll call vote, please.
President Close?
Aye.
Director Fong? Director Manieri?
Aye.
Director McCormick?
Aye.
Director Sheffield?
Aye.
Director Medina?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much, and we are adjourned.